You won't believe what people leave in rental cars. Rental agents confess. I was a detailer for Budget and Avis while I was in college. I can think of a few what the frick instances. First, we had a 4Runner come back with banana peels everywhere. Not just a few, I'm talking dozens. On the floorboards, hanging over the backseat headrests, stuffed in the door pockets, like Donkey Kong himself had been driving it for a week. There was the time we found a used glass pipe, the kind people do crystal with, under the back seat of a Silverado. Then there was the one time we got a one-way rental from another location dropped off with us late one night. The rental agent told me that when she checked it in, it reeked of number 2. Upon my inspection the next day, I found someone had smeared some kind of accident on the driver's seat and left smears of human feces all over it. To make it worse, we had a customer who wanted a one-way rental back towards the car's original location immediately. So I had about 15 minutes to clean it. Just do the best you can, is what I was told. And finally, the worst by far was the road construction company that rented a Corolla for a month. That was the only car that I wasn't able to save with a little work or time, and it had to be taken to a professional detailer. There was tar and asphalt stuck to the floors so thick that you couldn't even tell there was carpet underneath. Tar smears all over the steering wheel, shifter, dash, door panels, seats, headliner, and all over the outside too. On top of that, there was a bad vibration while driving, like the wheels needed to be balanced or the car needed an alignment. We took it to Midas and they ended up digging several pounds of asphalt out of the backside of the front right wheel. I worked as an MT for Enterprise about a year ago, and I rented a van to a lady and her husband so that they could move their son into college over in Colorado. They seemed very normal and down to earth. Upon return, they didn't mention any problems they had or anything that rubbed them the wrong way, and the van was basically in pristine condition. It had been a newer van when we rented it to them, only about 1,000 miles on it. A week later, the wife calls back claiming her and her family had gotten lice from our van, and the lice infected their home, causing huge losses of clothing and furniture, and the house needed to be fumigated. Apparently, the sand on the floor of the van had contained the lice, which had then hopped onto her and her husband's heads. It had to have been our van that was the source of the lice, and apparently couldn't have been any of the hotels or motels they stayed in at the week they were traveling to and around Colorado. The wife threatened legal action and a bunch of other stuff. She gave us repeated calls with tears and everything. When nothing came of it, we were all, what the frick, and just forgot about it. A while later, the husband came in to us with his tail between his legs, apologizing, saying his wife had lost it when their son moved out and had since been prescribed medication. It was super bizarre. I guess all of that passion, energy, and devotion from motherhood had to be transferred somewhere. In this case, getting a moderate amount of money back for a rental car that she'd apparently rubbed her head on the floor of. In seriousness, there is a legit level of pain that this woman was clearly struggling with. Call your parents, folks. Empty nest syndrome is real hard. Former Alamo agent here. I had an 18-year-old try to rent a car from my store, and he was denied because he had no credit card and was too young. His father came in and rented a car. He was told his son couldn't drive. The car was not returned, and we found it on the kid's college campus outside of a dorm dining hall with a sign in the window that said, "Put all garbage here," with the windows rolled down. It had been there for a week, and it was full of half-eaten food, rotting milk containers, and just the foulest smelling crap imaginable. The first tow truck company refused to tow it away because of the stench. They refused to get near it. Entire interior was replaced and it still didn't cure the smell. The area manager claimed it was damaged in a flood and we junked it. I can still smell that car 15 years later. Former Hertz agent. One of my best substance dealer customers would return her luxury car every week to swap out a new one with a $50 bill inside the contract for me. It was great until it wasn't. The last rental she ever got was a luxury SUV that was returned to our possession from police impound with 12 bullet holes and $6,700 worth of damage. I hated having to DNR her. DNR in this case is do not rent. Otherwise, no, I still wouldn't have resuscitated her. Ew. I went with a friend to rent a car. When they went to walk us to the car we rented, there was a car that had just been returned with a bunch of dents, scratches, broken mirrors, busted windows, the works. I went to ask the rental clerk about it, but my friend piped up. She tells me that this car was parked about a half block down the street, and some crazy lady chased a guy out of her house with a golf club and did a number on the car. My friend was surprised to see it here at the rental place. Later on, the story came out. The guy who rented it was dating a crazy chick and wanted to dump her. So he rents a car with full insurance to drive over to the crazy's house, and he dumps her. She flips out, wrecks the car, and he returns the car to Enterprise. I understand the rental insurance company is going after the ex for felony vandalism and restitution. Former Enterprise car prep guy here. We had a regular customer and frequent renter return his car saying he ran out of wiper fluid while driving on the highway. He goes on to tell us the story about how he pulled over to the side of the road, peed into his own personal Nalgene bottle, and then proceeded to pour said fluid into the wiper fluid reservoir so that he could clean the windshield. My boss replied with, "Wait, what?" And he goes, "Oh, don't worry, I just ran my Nalgene bottle through the dishwasher, so it's no big deal." A buddy of mine found a kilo of smack. It was in a small backpack hanging on the back side of the seat. They called the authorities and they arrested the renter when he came back for his backpack. A buddy of mine once found lice in the carpet and blood stains in the back seat. We'd think it was a cat or a possum that gave birth. A former famous rapper had a shootout on the highway after the concert. We returned 3 of the 5 vehicles that were involved. All of them had multiple bullet holes, blood, the whole 9 yards. Also had an up-and-coming boxer rent regularly from us. He'd rent multiple vehicles and let his entourage drive them. We found rubbers, dirty clothes, magazine casings, and ashes everywhere. Substances in the back, and they had the audacity to question the detail fee. I'm not a rental agent myself, but I'm pretty sure I made a few of them say, "What the frick?" at the DFW airport once. I took a wrong exit out of the garage and went over the tire strips. I made it about a half mile before I realized what had happened. I needed to get my team back to a client in Austin, and I didn't have the time to mess around. So I turned the car around and drove the half mile back and drove right into the return area on 4 flat tires. And they were loud in that garage. The worst part was a little kid who walked by the car and asked her mum, "Mom, what did that guy do to that car?" And the mother pulled her away. The agent came over with a "you're an idiot" look on her face. I said, "She's running a bit rough and pulling to the left. Do you have another car I could have?" She wasn't amused. A little paperwork and I was on my way again in another car. My company's insurance took care of it, but it was still quite embarrassing. I worked at a small firm at the time, and of course word and photos of that car spread across the whole company. There are pictures taken by my laughing team members who were in the car with me. The first is me filling out the claim form, the second is the agent doing her part on the form, and the third picture is me getting the new car from the other agent as I get the keys to the replacement car. You'll note the agent I was telling the story to was laughing pretty hard, while the other agent had a pretty good "what the frick kind of idiot are you" look on her face. Former truck rental guy here. We had a cube van, the kind made for deliveries, returned overnight. When we discovered it in the morning, half of the bench seat was covered in brown throw-up. Keep in mind that this was returned by a contract client, as in a business that rents from us almost daily and at any given time has 5 to 8 of our trucks in their possession. It wasn't just some random guy. Oh, I've got a couple. First, we had a lady return a car that she'd had for a weekend that was littered with pistachio shells, sunflower seeds, and cigarette butts. I'm talking pounds of sunflower seeds and shells and dozens of cigarette butts and a cup full of cigarette ashes. She only had it for a weekend and it was absolutely disgusting. We ended up charging her a cleaning fee of $250 after her return, but my boss made me clean it before we took it to the detailers. And then we had a couple of shady guys rent from us every week or so, and they only wanted a Nissan Altima. Every time, just an Altima. 3-day rentals, and they always came back smelling a bit like green herb, which was semi-normal. A couple of times, though, the back seat was loose, as if they'd pulled the seat off and put it back in to hide something. After my boss transferred stores, I refused to rent to them because I was sure they were trafficking stuff with our cars. I work for Enterprise currently, and just 2 days ago, someone returned a car with bite marks on the side. Naturally, we were all thinking, what the frick? It turned out that a horse had attacked it and then taken chunks out of the metal. Safe to say we're charging the horse owner for the repair costs. I mean, I think you should have charged the horse, but I can see why you didn't pursue that particular form of legal action just for the sake of actually getting paid. And that's not the first time I've heard of a horse doing this. It's called crimping or cribbing or something, and they seem to have left their teeth marks in cars all over the world. I rented high-end cars for travelers in Europe. You know, Benz, Ferrari, Porsches, and Lamborghinis. My favorite stories aren't quite returned, but here they are. The first was a client outside his hotel with his Ferrari waiting for our rep to come pick up the car. Random guy walks past and says, "Nice car." Our client says, "Oh, are you here to pick it up?" And the random guy says, Why, yes. Yes, I am." And he just drives off with our Ferrari. We require special insurance and paperwork before we let you take our expensive cars into Eastern Europe, because they tend to vanish over there. Guy renting an S-Class Benz never tells anybody he's going to Eastern Europe, and at the border gets turned around because the paperwork he has doesn't allow the car in there. He totally loses his mind and proceeds to ram through the border crossing and lead the cops in a car chase until he gets arrested. Then he called our 1-800 number to blame us for his incarceration. Then, of course, is the common stupidity of people that happened so often that it lost its WTF factor. What do you mean I have to pay the speeding tickets I get in Europe? I didn't know that the huge sticker on the keys, gas cap, and gas cap cover saying diesel only meant I couldn't fill it up with gasoline. And then you've got the used Johnnies and random underwear that we pretty frequently find as well. I once found about 60 hardcore gay adult magazines in the trunk of a rental.
You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius?
Worked for Avis Rental for about a year. We had this one guy who'd keep renting the Chrysler 300 for an extensive amount of time each time. He then decided to pimp the car by buying those black tinting wraps on the car for the windows. We knew that he was a substance dealer and we don't really care as long as he pays. Another story that relates to that particular Chrysler is when it was returned and the tires were effed. When I say effed, I mean not the flat tire deflated kind of story. I mean the tire rubber was shredded and the entire tire was literally warped to the point that it doesn't even look like a tire. More of a cone shape if I remember correctly. We assumed this guy had to do a donut to show off to his stupid buddies that he has a Chrysler 300. Worked as a service agent for Enterprise for about 1.5 years in Austin. The worst was this van that a guy bought back after having it for 3 weeks, and it seriously smelled as if something had died in there, and that he'd driven it out to a river and left a rotting corpse in the van half submerged. We opened up the van for 1.5 days and you could still smell it from 30 feet away. Anything closer than 5 would have you gagging. There was half-eaten food in it that had probably baked in the Texas sun, and the guy had left it there to fester as if the van was a large petri dish for him to grow his moldy, fungi demon creatures. Some unknown substance that looked half solid, half goo had packed itself in underneath the passenger seat, and we couldn't figure out what it was for the life of us. There seemed to be dog dew smeared on the dashboard and all over the panel, and some red stuff all over the wheel. The car had to be doubly cleaned by a third-party detail service we hired, and they spent about 6 hours cleaning that van out using surgical masks and rubber gloves. The engine itself was effed up, so we had to take it to the dealership where they worked on it for about 2 weeks, when we usually got them back in like 2 or 3 days. Though knowing that smell, one can understand why somebody would be hesitant to work on it. We let it air out for 3 weeks after that before renting it out, but you could still smell that lingering scent of all things unholy. Somebody left a gat on the front seat. Oh, sweet. Free gat. As a renter, my favorite was when we were renting cars to drive to a test range where we were testing tow missiles in the desert. And on the way there was a short, dry lake bed. So of course we raced those bad boys. One day a storm had blown some rocks off the hill, and my buddy drove right over one at a good 90 mph plus. Ripped out the bottom of every single fluid-carrying thing, the radiator, the engine, transmission, differential, gas tank. The car went about 100 feet after the rock and then just died. Oh, frick. We didn't have off-road coverage. We towed it out to the highway with the rock, left skid marks with another car, dropped the rock, poured out the appropriate fluids, dropped the car, and called the rental agency. They gave us a new car, but they kept their eyes on us for the rest of that contract. Oh, and about those tow missiles, we bought them. It's amazing what you can get when you're a defense contractor. They didn't have warheads. These were just test shots. Basically big, heavy fireworks that didn't go boom. I worked at Enterprise a couple years ago as an MT. I'd go back and help the service agents clean cars on slow days. Worst thing we found was literally number 2 smeared on the back seat. About a dozen empty cans of Monster on the floorboards. One of the seats was torn. Not too bad, just a pocket knife-sized thing. Trash filling every orifice the car had, and cigarette ash and butts in the cup holders. The whole car smelled of butt, cause, you know, the crap, and cigarette smoke as well. We have a no smoking rule on all of our cars, and these jerks just said screw it on that one. The car was a white Dodge Avenger 4-door. A 2010, I believe, but I'm not entirely sure. It was a standard class of car. It was horrible. My manager and the service agent just kind of stood in the wash bay and stared at it for 30 minutes after the customers left. Then I watched their faces go white with fear as my manager told them, "Well, clean it up the best you can." Straight up ridiculous. We had the car sent into an Indianapolis collision center because that crap was wrecked. This singular event was so bad that our area manager got involved. We filed a claim against the customer, had the car cleaned and detailed, and transferred it to be used at another branch a couple of counties away. Another story from the rent-a-car days, we had a Ford F-150 stolen. It was found a week later covered in Monster Energy decals and filled with stolen purses. We never caught the customers who stole it. Another time, some dingus took a log and smashed in the front window of a Genesis. Nothing was stolen, they just wanted to do damage. Again, nobody was caught. A fun bit that came out was that I got to drive the car to a repair shop with a gaping hole in the window. Fun times. I like that with the first car you literally just sent it to be someone else's problem. And actually I know what driving a car missing a windshield is like, and I feel doubly sorry for you. For those of you thinking it's just a playful wind tussling your hair, it's not. It's your eyes and mouth completely drying out from the draft and a ton of dust. And that's on a good day. God help you if it's raining. I once worked for a vehicle transportation company. Usually this would involve picking up cars and bikes damaged in accidents abroad. Anyhow, this time it was different. A company asked us to collect this car from a hotel car park in Berlin. They were very hush-hush about why, and it turned out that one of their members of staff had hired it on a business trip, but then they had promptly disappeared. When we got it back to the UK, it was still full of his stuff, which we thought was very weird, but when the hire car guy came to pick it up and was completely unfazed, it was almost like crap like this happened to him all the time. He drove it away, missing man's stuff and all. I had a short stint working for Avis. My job wasn't renting cars, but picking them up from out of state and driving them back. The two worst that I saw, one car was riddled with bullet holes and apparently was part of some kind of crime scene. There was blood in the back seat, but not tons of blood, so I'm assuming whoever got shot back there lived. Other than that, it was drivable and they had me drive it back. The worst one, and really the above was worse, but this one made me say, what the frick? I picked up a car from Indianapolis, the back seat folded down to make the trunk bigger. Somehow they'd broken the back seat so the thing wouldn't stay latched, and they'd also ripped up half the interior. But whatever, we get damaged cars all the time. Like, all the time. So whatever. I'm driving this car along the I-70 when I feel something brush my leg. I look down and I crap you not, there's a giant frickin' lizard in this car. Let me tell you, I damn near crashed from the shock. I'm like, what the frick? I pull off to the side of the road, call the company, and they told me they wanted me to drive it back anyway. And apparently they were warned, without relaying it to me, that there could be an animal in the car. Seriously, what the frick? Anyway, I'm not sure what kind of lizard it was. It was big, whatever it was. I'm thinking of like a large iguana or a baby monitor. I tried to grab it and throw it out of the car, but it kept tucking in behind the seats or running up into the trunk. After failing to get it out for over 15 minutes, I just tucked the opened, ripped-up interior under the seats so it couldn't get at my legs. Then I drove like crazy to get that car back to the station. Only about an hour ride from that point. I only worked there for like a month. I can only imagine what other people have seen there. I moved on to a better paying job. That Avis job was meant for like retired people. They only paid minimum wage and it was a part-time job. In the 80s, I was a shuttler for National Car Rental, not an agent. I returned cars to their home city. I drove tons of cars with dirty diapers in the back seat, but the most what the frick was a Toyota van that had obviously been used to muck out a horse stall. It still had some horse doo-doo in it. Well, here's some of my best of stories. The first was an SUV that was returned with throw-up all over the back. We had to turn that baby around in an hour and rent it out to some guys on vacation. They were mad and had to wait hours for a replacement. They'd paid big money to get to a private airport just to sit and wait for the rental car guys. Then there was the rental car to a girl who had her car in the car shop. She kept it for about a month and her dog apparently lived in the car. The hair was so ingrained into that thing that it took hours to get halfway out. And finally, the former CEO of Hertz flew into my vacation town every month. We had 3 high-class SUVs sitting around only for him. The only other people that would rent them were substance dealers because they'd pay the crazy money. Those cars had to be spotless for the CEO, and the district manager met the CEO on Friday nights at the airport. When he flew out, the manager had to be there to see him off. The CEO got fired after he moved the headquarters down there. These answers are the reason you never buy a car that was at one time a rental. I used to work for Enterprise as a service agent. That's a fancy way of saying a car cleaner. I try to block out some of the crap that people leave behind for you to clean, and you can typically look at the customer and know whether or not they're going to leave you a dirty car before they even leave the lot. One time, somebody left a portable toilet in the trunk. My friend got her car stolen. After only 23 hours, a cop found the thief and arrested him at a gas station a few miles from where he stole it. The male thief pulled up on the wrong side of the pump, and the car had a very feminine custom plate. The guy had the car for 23 hours and managed to trash the thing. We're talking Trojans, trash, ashes everywhere. We definitely all said what the frick. It's like he and his buddies ate McDonald's, smoked cigs, and did the deed with girls, or each other, I don't know, non-stop inside of one poor car. Former Enterprise employee here. We had a regular old gal who'd come in and rent out every couple of weeks for business. Really nice lady, and normally everything went very smoothly. Well, one day she returned to the car and I had the pleasure to take her home after returning from the drop-off. I come to find a huge box on my desk, and all of the other employees staring at me as I approach it. My manager tells me to open it, but to not let out a big reaction. At this point, I'm trying to figure out if someone's playing a prank on me. Anyway, I opened the box and my eyes went about as wide as they could. What I saw was the biggest and most unique collection of bedroom toys I've ever seen. This nice lady had forgotten her box of goodies in her car. Well, somebody had to return the box, so I volunteered and headed back to her place. Unfortunately, she wasn't home at the time, so I left the box hidden behind a bush. We were pretty sure she got the box as she never returned to rent a vehicle again. That was an interesting day, to say the least.
Reddit, what's the craziest freaking thing you have ever witnessed in real life with your own two eyes? When I was a teenager, I remember being in Indianapolis waiting on a stoplight to turn green when multiple police cars went flying by with their lights on and sirens screaming. They blocked the road off right in front of me with their cruisers, and a few officers jumped out. One officer ran behind a car that was stopped in the mall entrance drive, and once he was behind the vehicle, it immediately reversed and tried to run over the cop. The driver bailed and started to run before turning around and whipping out a gun, at which point the police shot him multiple times right then and there, and he dropped to the ground like a sack of potatoes. Most incredible thing I have ever witnessed in my life, even to this day. What's your story? At a clothing option beach a few years ago, I saw a woman roll onto the beach in a human-sized hamster ball. She took off her shirt and I thought, that woman has remarkably large breast implants. She then took off her pants and I thought, that woman has a remarkably large woohoo! She continued to roll the ball around the beach for about 20 minutes while another woman filmed her before rolling back off the beach. I knew, at that moment, that I would never see anything stranger in my entire life. I still feared that I am in the background of some sort of trans hamster ball fetish adult film. Diving at about 80 feet in Molokini Crater off Maui, I was looking at a reef when felt something smack my tank from behind. I looked up and my dive buddy's eyes were like saucers. The bump was from one of 3 bottlenose dolphins. They circled around us for a few minutes, then darted away. We were just awestruck in 80 feet of water with 30 pounds of gear while these amazing animals had a good time around us. Humbling. Just be glad they had a good time by themselves and not with you because, dolphins are scary. Like, worse than sharks scary. Trust me. One of my friends pulled himself up on top of what looked like a raised concrete platform. Turned out to be a vat of cow poop with a crusted layer on top. He got on top of the outside wall, took one step, and fell through and nearly drowned in liquid cow poop. Vomited everywhere, jumped into a nearby river fully clothed to get it off. I have a couple. 1. Downtown Vancouver. In line for a bar at about 11:30 p.m. Homeless guy walks by me, about 20 feet, drops his pants, and takes the wettest poop I've ever seen right on the sidewalk. 2. High school. Hanging out with a friend in his bedroom. He gets into a fight with his dad. Dad barges into room, and my friend simultaneously shuts the door. On his finger. Finger came off. Now that I think about it, I live a pretty sheltered life. Thanks, Western civilization! My weirdest experience was also in Indianapolis. I was sitting at a light in a convertible, and a truck driver pulls up and shouts, "Hey, y'all want some mayonnaise?" And then picks up a huge 64-ounce plus container of mayo and throws it at me. Thankfully, I caught it. Could have gone horribly awry, though. Still to this day, I don't know why this happened. Edit, reoccurring question, not only did I eat the mayo, I was on my way to a cookout, so a lot of people ate it. I saw the 2008 Toronto propane explosion happen from my 19th floor apartment balcony about 5 kilometers away. Seeing the sky go orange and feeling heat hit you like a truck from several kilometers away freaked me out. I wondered if it was a terrorist attack and who Canada could have ticked off. I was on vacation with my family in San Francisco. 2 homeless men got into a shouting match. One yelled, "Chew on this!" rushed a flock of pigeons, grabbed one in his hands, and hurled it at the other homeless man. The other man caught the pigeon in one hand, he had a trumpet in the other, and yelled back, "Respect all God's creatures!" and tossed it into the air. The pigeon flew away, and the man resumed playing his trumpet. Time for a gross medical story. I worked in the ER for almost 2 years. I was a scribe. This meant I followed around the doctors and took notes for them. Before seeing a patient, we would get a vague idea of why the person was in the ER by reading their chief complaint. We'd also either read the nurse's note or talk with the nurse who checked them in. We were going to see a patient with the chief complaint of, quote, skin rash, generally a pretty benign complaint. As we headed over to the room, we were stopped by the nurse who checked them in. "You're going to need a mask," she said. "What's going on?" the doctor asked. It's difficult to describe. You'll see it when you get in there. But the smell is pretty bad. You should wear a mask." She was silent for a moment. I worked in the ER for 30 years. I've never seen anything like that. We put on some masks and entered the patient's room. The stench was pretty bad, even with the masks on. The patient was an older woman. "What brings you in today?" the physician asked. "Well, I've got something going on under my left breast," the woman stated. "Okay, why don't we take a look at it?" The doctor moved the woman's gown aside to look at her breast. The woman pointed to under the breast. The doctor asked her to lift her breast. This is where the craziest thing I've ever seen comes in. As she lifted the breast, I realized something was not right. She kept lifting it, further than you really should be able to. Instead of normal pink flesh under the breast, I saw a decaying gray mess with a tinge of green, and then a rib. And then I realized I was essentially looking into this woman's chest. As she lifted the breast, it was like the hinge opening a door into her insides. Not much was identifiable, but the doctor did point out a huge mass that was essentially coming out from the breast. The doctor explained to me after we left the room that this woman had extremely late-stage breast cancer. The cancer had become so large it had started invading the chest wall, breaking down skin, muscle, anything that came in the way. That was why her skin had broken down under the breast. She also most likely had local fungal and bacterial infections in the decaying tissue, which was where most of the smell came from. Ugh, it was the craziest thing I've ever seen. Apparently, the woman was not a huge fan of doctors and just avoided coming in for about a year. She hid it from her family. I just cannot imagine living with that. And that's my story. Driving through Cleveland, I saw a naked, fat, homeless man rolling around on the sidewalk as some super skinny woman with just pants and a do-rag, no shirt or bra, was screaming at him and kicking him as he rolled down the street. Na 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 katamari damashi. I was in New York City for a meeting with a coworker in June of this past year. Since it was an amazing day out, we decided to have our meeting out in one of the local parks since it was an informal meeting and both of us wanted to enjoy the weather. After spending the morning going through our business, we both decided on lunch. Before we left, I needed to find a restroom. There was a public restroom in this park. It was well maintained and clean, but really busy. Since all the urinals were taken up, I stepped into a stall and did my business. As I am leaving the stall, I am careful to not swing the door open quickly since there were quite a few people in the restroom. Since I am stepping out slowly, I happen to notice a guy walk in wearing an apron for one of the local coffee places nearby. He walks up to a single urinal, not a trough, a single urinal that is already occupied by someone, squeezes in next to the guy, and ends up peeing on the other guy's hands. It happened so quickly that the original urinator had no idea what was happening. He backed away from the urinal, staring at his hands, screaming, "What the frick? What the frick?" The guy with the coffee apron never stopped peeing, and just said over and over, "Sorry, man." The guy who got peed on threw a punch in the crowded bathroom, and the coffee apron guy still never stopped peeing. I decided I did not want to be in that bathroom any longer and quickly snuck out. TLDR, you are never supposed to share a single urinal with another dude. Legend says that he's still peeing to this day. Man, I gotta say that the weirdest thing that I've ever seen in my life has to be somebody who isn't subscribed to Am I the Genius and Am I the Jerk, linked in the description below. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching. I've seen a lot of weird things in my current job. This morning, a guy walked in with a snake around his neck explaining that people called him, quote, Rhinestone Terry because his woohoo had bumps on it when he got erect. There was an Asian guy that fixed cars behind our shop. He only worked on other Asians' cars in our area. On our DVR, we had tons of videos of his customers peeing or taking a dump in the parking lot. Also had video of his wife scooping dog poop on our back door. I genuinely don't know what it is with all the poop in this episode, I'm sorry. One time there was a transvestite that came in here and walked straight to the front corner of our store. He dropped his pants and started jerking off while looking at us. My boss got a piece of conduit and poked him until he left. We used to fly a big balloon, kind of like what you see at car dealerships. It was an attempt to get attention and increase business. One day I was outside and had just finished filling up the balloon. I tied it off and was starting to walk back inside when a woman asked me, "How did you get that balloon up there? Helicopter?" There used to be an emergency vet next door. They were only open at night when the other vets were closed. A woman showed up in the middle of the day and shoved a truck bed full of animal organs out on their front door. Her reason was that they might need the, quote, parts. I saw two homeless guys get into a fight about 8 years ago when I first started this job. One of them pushed the other one out in front of a car passing by and killed him. He threw up his arms and screamed, "There can only be one!" My friend told me it wasn't a Highlander fight because it wasn't in a warehouse. Over the years, I've seen a lot of people crap themselves in my store. Just last week, an old man needed to use the bathroom. Before he got to the bathroom, he pulled his pants off in the store in front of people. I had to carry a computer out to this fat woman's car. When we got to the car, I put the machine in the back seat next to a kid that was eating Wendy's chili. She started crying and said that she had crapped herself. She then looked at her child and said, "It's in my coochie." He then threw up all over the back seat. I watched a guy stand about 200 feet away from our front door on the sidewalk and talk to no one. He then came in with a gun and wanted to know why we wouldn't show him any respect by talking back to him. I had a customer off themselves in a parking lot because he couldn't play World of Warcraft on a 15-year-old laptop. This was after he threw the laptop at me and I chased him out with a hammer. I saw a guy lay on his back and pee into the air while waiting for his ride across the street in a parking lot. I could go on forever with these. Take a hike to Big Bill Hells, home of challenge peeing. My mom took me to get my hair cut at a salon when I was a 13-year-old boy. I usually get my hair cut at the barber, but we didn't have the time. So, this petite gay guy is talking nice and cutting my hair. Next to me is this 14-year-old chick looking kinda cute. She has two huge gay guys cutting her hair. I'm 6'2" and 240 pounds, and I was about that size when I was 13. These two guys were lisping and snipping at her long blonde hair with their tight black shirts and huge arms. 10 minutes into her haircut, the guys cutting her hair start barking at each other that the other was cutting her hair wrong. These two huge gay guys start throwing fists and connecting with on each other's face. One stabs the other with a scissor in the arm. Blood is everywhere. The petite gay guy cutting my hair gets between me and the brawl, gets some blood on him, and gets hit in the face. The fight gets broken up, the one guy goes to the hospital, and my haircut was free of charge. That was way more exciting than the barber. I used to do security and landed a gig at the Teen Choice Awards. I landed the very best position that night, guarding some high-powered confetti blowers right next to the stage. I was underneath the section of the stage that rose up and the announcer stood. I saw every star from just a few feet away from them. Some older dude sitting near me kept turning around and later told me most of the girls here aren't wearing panties. I wasn't wearing my glasses, so it was pointless for me to stare out into the crowd. I hear them announce Megan Fox coming up to present the next award and look upwards as she walks into position. She wasn't wearing panties. I've seen numerous accidents, knife fights, you name it, but Mother Nature kicked all their butts this year. We were down in Baja at a beach called Los Cerritos. I was in knee-deep water with my daughter when someone yelled, "Whale!" Usually this means someone spotted a spout or something, so I'm thinking, no big deal. Well, a second or two, someone else yelled, so I looked up and there they were. A huge gathering of humpback whales, breaching, dancing, tail wagging. I've seen this before, but never in these numbers. Then, instead of watching the show slowly swim away, they stayed. Those whales stayed in that same spot playing for well over 20 minutes. It was the most incredible thing I've ever witnessed. And I've been around. A few years ago, I was in Boston visiting some friends and went outside to smoke a cigarette. I'm standing on the sidewalk, enjoying the autumn chill, and two cars screeched to a halt in front of me. Neither moved for a minute, and so I didn't think anything of it. Just odd. Then, from seemingly out of nowhere, 2 cops come running at the cars with their guns drawn. The cops were screaming, "Mother effer, let me see your hands, don't move!" All kinds of deliciously profane things to shout in the middle of the day in the middle of a city. They slapped the hood of the first car and yelled at the driver to take off, and then stood on opposite sides of the rear car, their guns aimed through the windows and still screaming. A few moments later, about 10 cop cars pull up, lights and sirens, and cops start piling out with their guns drawn, a couple with shotguns that they racked and then leveled at the car. I was about 20 feet away, but none of them even seemed to notice. I wasn't told to back away or anything. As this is happening, a small crowd began to gather. So, since I'm on the passenger side, I couldn't see the driver. The cops open the door on my side and pull out the passenger. He was a normal-looking guy, white guy in t-shirt and jeans, and they lay him down on the road, cuff him, and take him off to the squad car. So far, pretty interesting. Then they take the driver out and lay him on the ground, but since he's on the other side of the car, I still can't see him. Cops then start pulling things out of the car and putting them on the hood. Bottles of pills, a backpack, and then a gun. This is getting more interesting. Then, as we are all standing in rapt attention, this huge cop, black, probably 6'5" and about 300 pounds, reaches down to pick up the driver. He does so with one hand, and we all stand in amazement as we realize the driver is a midget and is dangling from the hands of this gigantic cop. The midget is screaming at the top of his lungs, "Screw you, cops, blah blah blah," and the cop pretty much carries him one-handed to his squad car and throws him in the back. When the cruiser takes off, there was a moment of silence, and then everyone, probably 30 bystanders, a dozen cops, everyone, starts laughing hysterically at the same time. I called every single person I knew, just so that I would not be accused of making it up. It was hands down the funniest thing I have seen. TLDR, I saw a midget get arrested at gunpoint. There was much communal laughter. I live in Philadelphia, and I was walking up Broad Street, one of the main thoroughfares in the city. All of a sudden, I hear sirens, which isn't that unusual, and I see a cop racing down the street, which also isn't that unusual. But then I see a Jeep, oblivious to this cop, start to cross Broad. At about this time, I got the, "Oh crap, this is going to end horrendously" face and stopped to watch. Well, the Jeep gets about halfway across the street when the cop, who is doing at least 65 to 70, broadsides the Jeep, goes airborne, and flips end over end twice and then lands upside down. While the cop is flipping over, the Jeep is doing a barrel roll, also airborne, but underneath the cop, and this is where it reaches the point of peak insanity. After the cop lands, the Jeep lands on top of the cop, and it's like one giant pile of twisted metal, broken glass, and shredded rubber. A few seconds later, all of the other cops, who were racing to the same crime scene as the first, come barreling down Broad. They all screech to a halt, jump out of their cars with their guns drawn as if the driver of the Jeep was some mastermind terrorist bent on murdering the Philadelphia police force. OSU Michigan football game in Columbus, 2005 or 2006, I forget. After the Bucks won, I stepped onto the porch with a few friends to have a smoke. As soon as I get outside, it smells like smoke. Sure enough, there was a 7-foot-high stack of porch furniture on fire right in front of the house I was at in the middle of the road. The fire really begins to grow as dozens of people are continuing to toss more and more couches and chairs onto this inferno. Now, keep in mind, all of this takes place in a little under 1 minute. Out of nowhere, a city snowplow comes flying out of the alleyway and crushes the whole pile down to nothing and scatters it all over the road and alley. Cheers erupt from all the neighboring houses at the scene, loving the hysteria that is going on around them. All of a sudden, a huge beam of light shines down right onto the street, followed by another as 2 police helicopters swoop across the area. Then, almost immediately after all of this crap is going down, a wall of police on horseback arrive. I mean, these guys own the street sidewalk to sidewalk, batons in hand, just swatting at anyone stupid enough to get in their way. They marched right down the street and dispersed the area in less than 1 minute. No one was injured. Best thing I've ever seen. One time, I was in this pretty important business meeting. There was a town involved, regarding company acquisitions for an organization which I was led to believe I had no ownership in. After investigating some fraudulence on the part of my, quote, business partners, I determined I had actually still owned 50% of the company. Having known this, as the purchasing entity had no knowledge, I sold him 500,000 units of my product before the deal went through and then refused to sell him the company, saving my town and my dad's company. That's not even the crazy part. After I revealed that a married couple in the meeting had committed fraud, the husband ran out into the testing floor, it was an auto brakes factory, and tried to escape. But while telling us to screw ourselves, he tripped and fell onto an active brake test car and accidentally flipped the switch to activate it. Needless to say, we were all pretty worried about the poor guy, but fortunately, the brakes actually worked. But the guy went flying into a chair which was being tested for durability impact. One of these giant punching bag-like weights landed directly on his balls, ensuring he would never be able to reproduce again. That's still not even the crazy part. The craziest part is that the wife of the guy who committed fraud decided to shack up with the owner of the original purchasing company immediately as they left the meeting room, and no one even thought to arrest her or anything. This is after she committed multiple accounts of fraud, maybe even attempted murder and polygamy. Although this happened right in front of news cameras and police officers, but she was, quote, like a 10, so I guess it was okay. For those not getting it, IMDb Tommy Boy. And I've been reading a movie reference this whole time. Okay, never mind then. You know how sometimes when you can see/hear someone committing an act of douchebaggery, your immediate reaction is wishing they get exactly what's coming to them? Well, one night I was sitting on a bench outside a train station, and I can hear this guy driving like a real jerkwad. I can't see him yet, but I can tell from the sounds that he's doing burnouts and donuts and the like on the public street next to the building. I say to myself, I hope that jerkwad wrecks his car. And as soon as I get out the word car, I look up and see him come screaming around the side of the building and slam his car head on into a telephone pole. It wasn't particularly crazy by conventional standards, but the timing of it was just insane.
What's the worst thing that's happened at your family gathering? Grandma died sitting on the couch while we all thought she was sleeping. So we went on with dinner. We all ate, drank, and were merry until the wee hours of the morning when somebody tried to wake her up. Nobody knew what to think about the fact we partied next to Grandma's corpse for like 6 hours. Oh, I think I'd feel awful. Like maybe with time, that would heal it a bit, maybe be a little bit funny to some degree, but that's still kind of grim. This didn't happen to me, but I watched it happen and it was awful. My cousin was pregnant from a guy who she had only been dating for a few months, but he was a good guy. On Christmas Eve, she invited him to our family gathering, and when we were exchanging presents, he grabbed a small box from the tree and was 2 seconds from getting down on one knee when that uncle jokingly says, "God, I hope you're not proposing." Everyone laughs and this guy is in a half-bent knee, half-standing pose and just looks up at that uncle and slowly powers through it and slowly gets down on one knee and proceeds to ask her if she'll marry him. She said yes, and they're engaged, but it was one of the worst 45 seconds of my life. Whoa, 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 whoa. That's the worst 45 seconds of his life. You don't get to claim that. And honestly, good for that guy for being able to power through it. I don't exactly agree with people getting married after a few months, but they do them. Thanksgiving about 1985, family gathering at my parents' home. Mom, dad, brother, sister, grandmas, aunts, uncles, cousins, etc., all watching football. Cousin picks up the remote to mess with the volume but turns on the VCR on accident. Full-blown smut fills the screen. Dad leaps, grabs the remote and fumbles frantically to turn it off. Bible thumper brother and sister-in-law snatch up their kids and leave. Cousin says, "Boy, that sudden death can really get intense." My stepmom never got along with her sister-in-law, brother's wife. They got into a fist fight one Thanksgiving at my grandparents' house. Grandma got mad and called the police. My dad was a police officer at the time. Guess who showed up to arrest his wife and sister-in-law? I mean, if I were a policeman and one of my relatives' addresses came up on the dispatch radio or whatever, I'd also be like, nope, this is on me. I'm taking care of it. Great-grandma's funeral in Arkansas. I have some distant third cousin named Stormy. Again, this is in Arkansas. And we're all gathered around the grave, and as the preacher starts to lead us in prayer, you hear this awful noise. Everyone turns to look, and there is Stormy, swinging an armadillo around his head by the tail. One of my other cousins got him to put the armadillo down so we could finish the service, but I don't recall ever having seen him at another family gathering since then. Yes, Stormy is male. He was about 19 at the time. Yes, the armadillo was alive. Apparently it had a nest or was taking taking a nap, I don't know what armadillos do in their spare time, under a nearby bush, sounded kind of like a cat rejecting the advances of an unwanted lover. To quote Hank Hill, that boy ain't right. My grandmother tried to self-delete herself in the front yard because my mother wouldn't let me and my siblings, 6, 4, and 2, ride sitting on the back hood of my uncle's classic convertible during their neighborhood 4th of July parade. She was angry that no one would be able to see our outfits if we were seated inside the car, and while trying to delete herself, accidentally grazed my grandpa in the process. Good times. That is certainly what I would call an unnecessary escalation. Oh, I have one. This happened like a week ago at a little get-together of my family at my house. My brother-in-law and his wife got into a huge argument about their new baby's medical care. The little one had a terrible case of psoriasis, and he blamed his wife for not staying on top of it, causing it to bleed. During this shouting match, Bill declared that if he was going to be raising some other man's baby, he was going to be calling the goddamn shots from then on. They have been married for 10 years and have 2 other girls. We were all so mortified we left my house. 10 other people got into cars and went to the park. This was my husband's brother and his wife, by the way. Man literally said, I'm not the stepfather, I'm the father that stepped up, and I'm gonna be... I don't think many men would openly declare, this child ain't mine, but by God, I'm gonna do this right. Proposed to my girlfriend at my birthday party and she said no, then told me she had been cheating on me. This was post-cake. They always stick around for cake, mate. During Christmas, with the family, we discovered the hard way that my little sister, who was 3 years old, was prone to cerebral seizures. Everyone was freaking out while my little sister was blue and foaming at the mouth. Aunts, uncles, and dads start arguing over my grandfather's possessions, after his passing in his house after his funeral. Lots of yelling, pushing, get the F outs that day. Eventually pulled my dad out of the house in an effort to save the family. They never recovered. My uncle passed away without ever speaking with my dad again, and the others speak a bit to each other, but we haven't had any family events. It's been 3 years. Christmas at my auntie's house with my whole extended family on my dad's side, and their pets. In particular, these 2 dogs, one of which was very fond of the other, and this dog decided he wanted to have his way with the smaller, uninterested dog. Long story short, the large dog busted a nut all over the kitchen floor, leaving a huge mess that we had to clean up before eating our dinner. That is a bad dog. That is a very, very bad dog. Thanksgiving back in 1998. I was 8 years old and my wealthy grandparents decided to take the whole family to Maui for the week. This included our 5-person family and around 15 extended family members. All was great until Thanksgiving dinner. My older cousins started bickering, which turned into a pretty big altercation and some food throwing. 8-year-old me is loving it until the uncles get involved. My 18-year-old male cousin, who was a total butt wipe, starts freaking out at my 15-year-old female cousin, calling her a harlot for reasons unbeknownst to me. At this point, female cousin's dad comes flying over and punches his nephew so hard that he is literally thrown a few feet and is nearly knocked out. Now, the other uncle has to defend his son, which results in a few punches between those two until my family can separate them. There will never be a better Thanksgiving dinner, and my grandparents will never take us anywhere again. We gathered at my grandma's house where my mom and all her sisters had been raised. My oldest aunt had done a bunch of dodgy stuff to glom all the estate, and the sisters had come in full force with their husbands and kids to try and talk sense into her. It did not work. They should have lawyered up, but this was the 60s. Hell, I don't know why they were all so weak. All of us cousins had been kicked out while the grown-ups argued. I was just a little kid, and I went to get a glass of water. She had put locks on the cupboards. Mean aunt came in and slapped me across the face so hard I was staggered. I did not get water. One of my older cousins found me crying and took me to town, riding on his shoulders part of the way to buy me a soda at the drugstore and a few toys. Many years later, my mom told me mean aunt most likely poisoned grandma, and it seems true. What you have there, my friend, is a classic Disney evil aunt. I'm picturing the lady from the goddamn Rescuers, you know, the one with the red hair and the crocodiles. That's the kind of lady that sounds like. My mother-in-law's boyfriend randomly out of nowhere just says, in case anyone was wondering, I'm against gay marriage. My mother-in-law, to her credit, looks at him and just said, did anyone ask? It was an awkward couple of minutes. My alcoholic uncle got so drunk at his own daughter's wedding that he urinated on the wedding cake in front of half the wedding party. He quit drinking after that. Relatives showing off their weird-looking baby and people trying not to say anything awful about it. Being one of the first to greet them and thus having no warning, all I could come up with was, oh, that's a baby. I guess no blood was spilled, but I felt like dirt afterwards. I once, without thinking, just openly said that I thought it was weird that people hang up pictures of ultrasounds in front of my friend who was doing just that, and I got a lot of words thrown at me. Luckily, I missed this Christmas cause me and my mom and dad were at Disneyland. My great-grandma had a dog. Can't recall what it was, but it was super small since before I was born. Well, one Christmas, everyone is eating in the kitchen with a clear view of the dog in the backyard. In the middle of Christmas dinner, a big Doberman comes into the backyard and rips the little dog's throat out. Kind of ruined Christmas. Kind of ruined Christmas? I think that's the understatement of the century. My grandmother threw her prosthetic breast at me. I was watching the American football game during Thanksgiving while my relatives, mostly female, were sitting at the table within view of the living room. Suddenly I hear, "Hey," name, and as I turn to look in that direction, this blob comes at me and I reactively catch it. They start laughing and I realize that I'm holding my grandma's prosthetic pillow. Never has a breast been rejected by my hands so quickly. We had a huge family dinner at a very fancy restaurant. My great-aunt decided to move a very fancy pot of flowers with some peacock feathers stuck in it out of the way. In this case, out of the way meant right above the candles. It turns out the peacock feathers burn incredibly fast and produces a lot of smoke. The whole restaurant had to be evacuated. To be honest, it wasn't really that bad. The dinner had been incredibly boring. 14-year-old me certainly thought the fire made things a lot more interesting. This one day, we woke up in a relative's house after a gathering night. We found the morning water tasted weird, so my cousin and host checked the water tank. The rat was floating there. Everyone in his house headed to the hospital instantly. I'd be doing the same thing. Well, we have a family reunion annually in Virginia for some distant relatives on my mom's side. No one in my immediate family has attended until about 7 years ago when my mother started driving my grandma to the reunion. Dad says that we could make it a family trip, but Mom brushed the idea off. My parents divorced 5 years ago, and the next year my mom somehow cons me into attending the reunion with her and her new boyfriend. Everyone at the reunion already knew her boyfriend. Turns out she had been taking him up to our family reunion for the last few years with my grandma. I'm starting to believe my grandma never cared for my dad all that much. My grandma was staying over with us at my parents' house on Christmas Eve. The evening went great and everyone was happy. Right as everyone's going to bed, my grandma starts throwing up in her bed, saying she feels horrible, but she doesn't want us to call an ambulance because she doesn't want to trouble anyone on Christmas Eve. She's like the epitome of a sweet old lady. My parents call an ambulance anyway, and good thing because it turns out she was having a heart attack. She lived, ended up having a quadruple bypass, followed by a full recovery, our Christmas miracle. She's still alive and kicking and still smart as a whip. I miss my grandmother. Introduced to a distant cousin for the first time who was 10. She was beautiful, and I was told that she was deaf. I had never met a deaf person. We were both 15 years old. I shook her hand and said to my brother who was standing next to me, "She's a babe." She started to laugh. "I read lips," she said. Singing Sweet Home Alabama all summer long. We're celebrating an uncle's birthday and we realized about 15 minutes into it that grandma died. Everyone lost their mind because she was 75 and seemed fine 10 minutes before. Died of a massive brain aneurysm. Whole family was devastated and I still took some cake. This happened just a couple of months ago. My wife is pregnant and we were a few months in. We had gone to the doctor to find out the gender and we were throwing a family party to deliver the news. Her family is very well off and very large. I'm talking 50 people within a 5-block radius to her grandparents' house. My side of the family is super small. Just my mom, stepfather, and aunt come to the party. So I supplemented my side with some of our mutual couple friends. About an hour into the party, we had everyone go outside for the reveal. We prepared these poppers filled with confetti, either blue for male or pink for female, for the announcement. I thought it would be hilarious to make one filled with the opposite color, but my wife said no. Anyways, everyone gets a popper, lines up on either side of the driveway. 3, 2, 1. Pop! Pink glitter and confetti fly in the air. Everyone is hooting and hollering in celebration. We start receiving congratulatory remarks from my friends and her family. I made the announcement that we had come up with a name. Right after I said the name, my mother comes up to me and says, "Are you sure it's not a boy?" "Yes, I'm very sure. The doctor confirmed it last weekend." A tear starts to roll down her cheek. "And y'all are firm on the name? We really like the name we picked out. What about my middle name, Jean?" "I'll get my wife, but I think we're pretty set on the name we picked out." She left shortly after that exchange without saying goodbye. Apparently, right after the pop, she turned to my friend who had just gotten her PhD and asked how reliable those sonograms are at determining the gender of the child. She gave us the cold shoulder for the next 3 months and has a collection of boy names ready just in case 3 doctors and a handful of nurses are wrong about us having a baby girl in December. Some people just utterly hate being wrong. Christmas dinner. Grandpa picked up something at the store that wasn't wasn't what Grandma asked for. Grandma threw frozen chicken at Grandpa's head. Grandpa ducked, chicken hit glass patio door, shattering it. Police were called, children were quickly taken and driven home, and Grandma wonders why most of the family doesn't make much of an effort to stay in touch. My brother throwing a temper tantrum at age 30. It has been pretty common for him to blow up about little crap all his life. It was his youngest daughter's second birthday, and he was in a really bad mood all day, even though our mum and his wife had taken care of everything. It came to a head when it was about time to do the cake. It was kind of a tall cake with a carousel on top. The dog bumped into the table and the cake shifted a little, almost knocking the carousel over. He stood up and said something like, "God damn it, your frickin' dog is ruining everything." My mom said, "Calm down, the cake is fine." He got in her face and said, "Don't tell me what to do, B-word." At that point, my brother and stepdad got up and kind of surrounded him, ready to kick his butt. After a few seconds, he finally stormed out of the house and left. I feel the need to reiterate at this point that he was 30 years old and it was his daughter's second birthday. Now, I'm hardly one to make excuses for anyone's bad behavior, but it sounds like he had some undiagnosed anger issues. About 12 years ago, we were all at my uncle's house. Me, my siblings, parents, grandparents, and obviously my aunt and uncle. Grandpa was drinking some coffee with dessert when it went down the wrong pipe, and he choked up a bit. My mom, being one of the biggest overreactors I've ever known, assumes he's having another heart attack. He has a history of heart trouble, and flips the heck out. When my aunt tried to intervene and say that he wasn't having a heart attack and only coughing because of the coffee, they got into a screaming and shoving fight. Eventually, my uncle just goes, "Get the hell out of my house, get the hell out right now." 10 minutes later, we're all in a car and out of there. Up until last year, they cut off all contact with my aunt and uncle, and fairly recently, they've talked to them, added them on Facebook, invited them to events, etc. Our worst family story happened at my aunt's wedding. My aunt, a white lady, was marrying a Korean-American man whose parents really wanted him to marry a Korean woman. During their entire engagement, his parents would invite random Korean women over for dinner to try and sway him. Eventually, they seemed to get over the fact that he was definitely going to be marrying a white girl. On the wedding day, his parents seemed politely resigned to the situation. His father actually even danced with my aunt at the reception, so we were all relieved. After dancing, his father approached the mic, and we all expected him to give a toast about how my aunt was so great that he overcame his prejudice or something. Instead, he said in his thick Korean accent, "This is abomination, like German Shepherd mating with poodle." My aunt ran out of the room crying, and my grandfather casually walked up and punched him in the face in front of 200 wedding guests. People cheered. I know this dude was Korean, and Khan Susanusum phone is Laotian, but I can totally imagine that happening if Bobby and Khan Jr. from King of the Hill got married. Well, it was a series of events, but it all came to a head at my grandfather's funeral. However, I'll attempt to make this as short as possible. So, a number of years back, my grandfather had a stroke. No one knew it was a stroke till 2 or 3 years later while he was refurbishing his 32 Chevy, which he treated better than his family. Eventually, he started to deteriorate and can no longer care for himself, and my grandmother can no longer do it by herself. In comes my brother, who closes down the business he just opened in order to be his full-time caregiver. I helped him as much as I could, but I lived 4 hours away at the time, finishing up college. Occasionally, his brother and sister would come to visit, but for no more than 20 minutes before they had to scurry out the door for important business, all the while telling him how much they loved him. Eventually, he passed away in a peaceful manner, surrounded by my family. I'm still away at this point, and reconciles with them for all the crap he had to put them through. In comes his siblings, who, once again, shrieked like banshees while mourning his death as if they had done everything to care for him. They did not. However, my grandfather said I took care of him more often than they did, and I was a full-time student who lived 4 hours away. Then comes the wake, or open casket viewing for those who may not know, where his family puts on a show for everyone to show their love in a public setting. Eventually, things slow down, and my grandmother thinks it would be nice to share our fond memories of him with those who have gathered to show their support, which we do. However, when my grandmother gets up to speak, they begin to chatter amongst themselves and abruptly leave in the middle of her speech. This was the last straw for my father, who confronted them and told them they would no longer be able to carry his casket to lay him to rest. The following day at the funeral, things went eerily smooth, although they did the whole banshee wails again for attention, but other than that, it was peaceful. Then comes the final goodbyes before we lay him down to rest. best. All of the sisters thought it would be great to write a joint letter to my brother and grandmother who took care of him in his final days and speak their minds. The gist of the letter was that they killed him, neglected him, and ignored him, which led to his death. Also included was a jab at my nephew, who was 2 at the time, stating that if my brother cared for his son like he cared for my grandfather, he would have another tinier casket to deal with in the near future. They ended the letter telling us to repent for our sins and to ask God for forgiveness unless we wish to burn in hell. We don't speak much anymore with that side of the family. Inheritance really seems to bring out the worst in families at times. Like, one time at band camp, I'm kidding, one time I went on a date with this woman who had recently inherited a fairly large property that she had plans for from her father, who left it in their name. I'm not going to name names here. And their family, all the way from like the Yemen or something, came down to England to try and like get something out of her, even though they weren't named in the will or anything like that. They had nothing to do with them for years or anything. And basically they put her through hell and in trying to like gain the property entirely for themselves, even to the point of threatening her. I was 10 and there was a family gathering at my aunt's house with a bunch of people staying over at her house. Get called into the family room and all my aunts are there looking at me. They start questioning me about my grandma's clock and whether I was playing with it, which I did, so I said yes. Turns ugly real quick, and it's an all-out argument between my mom defending me and my aunts accusing me of breaking my grandma's $5 clock. They keep grilling me about whether I broke the clock, although it wasn't broken, the batteries just fell out. Fight drags out into the night. The hosting aunt brings out other instances of how I wasn't behaving, like running my fingers through her carpet and drawing on her carpet with my finger, eventually accuses my dad of purposely breaking her sleeping bags. Me, being 10 and not understanding what this fight is actually about, feels guilty that maybe I caused this whole thing because I played with my grandma's clock, and my poor mom is defending me when I might have broken my grandma's clock by playing with it. The hosting aunt eventually apologizes to my mother months later, but it made things really awkward for 10 years. Even now, things aren't really the same. Years after the whole thing, I realized it wasn't even really about me or the clock. It was about some other crap that I don't really even understand. But my aunts used me as their point of attack. I even remember me saying all of this over a clock when I was 10 during the fight, and one of my aunts insisting it was more than that, implying that it was about how I was a horrible liar or something. You can't make this stuff up. My older brother died in his sleep when he was 16, shortly before Christmas in 2005. During his funeral, my grandfather, Mom's dad, got up to speak right after my sobbing dad and said, "I'm the grandfather. I just wanted y'all to know that," and sat down. Everyone either looked confused or extremely angry. The reason why this was extra crappy was because we had never seen him until then. My mom had spoken about him in a very negative way over the years and told us he had left her and her siblings when they were young. He worked as a pimp and a substance dealer, and he had recently gotten a 25-year-old pregnant. A few months after my brother's funeral, my mom told me my uncle had been born. One of my best friends attended the funeral, and he still likes to joke about my grandfather. 2 days later, my girlfriend of 2 years cheated on me at a New Year's Eve party. I went to a family reunion in the holler of Kentucky with folks I thought I knew. It was my cousin's or great uncle's house. I'm not too sure, and he is 80 plus years old and his family has owned this land forever. Everyone, except for my immediate family, was very close to them. So some like 12-year-old girl in my family who was white brings over a black girl. Everything was fine and dandy till one of the owners saw this. He yelled at the top of his lungs, "What the F is this crap?" Insert hick name here. "Didn't build this land to have an, oh geez, on it. It ain't right." That little girl will never forget that. She had to deal with real racism right in her face, and I was so embarrassed for being a part of that family and felt that I had to apologize for being associated. We left very quickly after.
Art teachers of Reddit, what's your draw anything you want story? Not my story, but seems to fit here. When I was in school to certify to become a teacher, we had a former principal as a professor for one of our courses who was trying to illustrate how difficult it could be to manage parent complaints and how to approach those situations with administration. His example was how he had been called into a conference once with an angry mom and the elementary school art teacher. The mom was furious because the teacher had asked the children to close their eyes and draw whatever came into their imagination. His assumption was that a student had drawn something inappropriate. Nope. The mom was mad because summoning an image in one's mind was, quote, witchcraft. "So, little Timmy, what did you draw in class today?"
"I drew a rainbow."
It's not drawing, but I gave my high school kids a poetry assignment. They could write about anything that was school appropriate and have one curse word that wasn't a slur or the F-bomb. It had to include so much figurative language and whatnot. Girl turns in, quote, Mrs. My name is a B. A poem about how she's tired of writing poems and that she's annoyed with me for assigning so many. Includes all requirements. I gave her a 96, a few errors, and the next poem she writes is, quote, Mrs. My name is a cool B. About how she was sorry she was mean. I just remembered a poor little guy who drew a self-portrait. He drew with meticulous detail, and when it came down to drawing his pants, he drew the zipper so carefully, but it looked like a member. I was flummoxed about how to tell him that people might see something there that he didn't intend. My brother was told to draw an animal from any angle he wanted, so he drew a dot and said it was a very far away lion. I was substitute teaching an art class. An 8th grader drew a picture of an adult woman touching a child. I pulled the student aside after class and found out her aunt had been touching her for years when she was babysat or came to visit. I reported it, and her aunt ended up going to prison. Kids will sometimes draw things that they normally wouldn't say out loud. In early middle school, we did a project where we used cardboard draped in colorful paper mache to make a sound word, like wham or crinkle. I was really into knights at the time, so I made the word that was the sound of someone unsheathing a sword. That word was schlong. I got in trouble once for drawing a pooping butt. Little did my teacher know, but the drawing was actually a poorly drawn butterfly that ended up looking like a hairy pooping butt, and when asked why I put the details I did, like the legs, an antenna, and proboscidea coming off the segmented body, I said, I don't know, don't they all look like that? I saw one at recess and thought it was pretty and wanted to draw it. Thinking of the butterfly, of course. Nope, I ended up having to go see the school counselor. High school 1977. Not a teacher. While everyone else was drawing Pink Floyd rainbows and peace signs all over everything, the biggest burnout in the class made a wide metal bracelet with intricate triangular designs cut out of it. He turned it in and got a great grade for the first project he ever bothered finishing and some well-deserved praise for his effort. Teacher handed our work back, and first thing he did was grab a pair of pliers and bent all the triangles outward, making it a thick metal spiked bracelet. I found that devilishly, disturbingly clever. As a kid who was told to do a drawing that was going to be put on a plate, drew my cat doing a poo. I was asked multiple times if I wanted to redo it. I declined the offer. So, most of my life, I ate off a plate with my cat on it doing a poo as it was my plate, and still do. My siblings had similar plates with a car and a rocket ship. Mine is clearly much better. Was around 5 or 6 at the time, and totally worth it. Still had the plate. I have a quote, design your own monster Halloween lesson. Most kids draw cute ghosts or cool vampires. One 7th grader drew a sad clown hanging by a belt from a ceiling fan. He had issues. I ran arts and crafts classes at a youth group for disadvantaged kids. Decided one day to give them total freedom. I just put out all the supplies we had and let them go crazy. Kids made some really cool works of art, all very colorful and creative. I was talking to one kid when another asked me to help him spell things for his artwork. I go over to his table with him, and he's been making a card for a boy in his class at school. He tells me his friend's mom had just died from cancer, and he wanted to make a card for him to cheer him up, but he couldn't spell anything he wanted to write. He was 13 years old, and I had to help him spell out something like, Dear blank, I am so sorry about your mom, but I will always be your friend and here for you. Love, blank. I had to help him spell his own name. He made the card totally unprompted. I feel for the guy. He was totally sweet and caring for his friend and really smart. He just not got the help he needed. Went home after and had a little sob. Edit. Hey guys, thanks for the rewards. I really appreciate all the lovely things you've been saying. I'd just like to say that I really didn't do anything special here. I only helped him spell out a card. I wish I could have done more, but I was fresh out of high school and was only volunteering. I actually had been in one of the other youth groups they ran and been asked to volunteer in this one as they needed more hands. I left shortly after this for university. I reported the incident to my supervisor, and she assured me he was getting the care and help he needed, but they could not tell me more for security reasons. He was the real hero here. I hope he and his friend are doing okay. Thanks again. One kid had to have a meeting with the principal, her parents, and the art teacher because the art teacher decided that because this 2nd grade girl only drew people without hands, the little girl felt powerless. All these adults question this child about the meaning of her drawings. She tells them, hands are too hard to draw. Sometimes, Only children can understand adult problems. And this is one of them. Why do we have so many fingers? Former student here. We were supposed to do a bit of abstract artwork for a course assignment. My work was a framed square cutout from an old t-shirt I had previously used to help restain an old table. Not only did I get an A on the assignment, but I entered it into a silent auction later that semester and someone bought it. When I was in the 7th grade, our art teacher had us do whatever we wanted to be entered in the school art fair. I was really lazy and just decided to use every color of pastel that was available to draw a rainbow of sorts on a piece of construction paper. Then, I tore it all into pieces and glued them all together again randomly. I called the piece Life and argued that it was supposed to represent the chaos and uncertainty that is life. It ended up winning first place in my grades part of the art fair, and I ended up getting a cool art set, but really it was just me being lazy and feeding some BS about a deeper meaning. Reminder from your friendly neighborhood Reddit narrator that it's always a good idea to subscribe and like the video. Hit the bell to turn on notifications, and remember to subscribe to Am I the Jerk too, linked in the description below. As always, thanks for watching. Parent here, not an art teacher. In kindergarten, my son came home with a packet of finished assignments he got back from the teacher. One was a paper having them draw a body part with the prompt, "Here are my." Example given was feet. What did my kid draw? Butt cheeks. Drawing of the back of a person with two giant, well drawn I might add, cheeks. My husband and I laughed our own butt cheeks off when we saw it. We kept the paper, for posteriority. Student here, my art teacher was somewhat crazy. She let us draw anything we want, and to get 100%, all you had to do was tell her it, quote, had a deep connection to the earth or some other nonsense. I drew a jellyfish and told her it represented wisdom because it was immortal. When I was in 2nd grade, our teacher told us to doodle on the back of a quiz if we finished early. I decided to draw a house high in the sky with a long staircase leading to it. To emphasize its height, I drew clouds, but it needed more. I decided to add in an airplane. Later, my teacher called me to her desk, and I got in trouble because the plane looked like it was heading towards the house, and this was right after 9/11 happened. Still have no idea what I was thinking. When I was in high school, part of the final exam/assessments in art class involved picking an object of your choice based on a written passage and painting it as best as you can. My art teacher told us about one kid who chose a book as his object. He turned up with an art book with a professional still life painting on the cover and proceeded to recreate the painting stroke by stroke. If I recall correctly, there were phone calls made to his parents and to the Board of Education over it, but the kid got away with it in the end. I assume there were some changes to the rules after that. Edit. Since this is now my top comment, here's a bonus story about the same assessment. When the time for my own assessment came around, the object I chose to paint from the written passage was a skull. The next day, the teacher made his way around the class, asking students individually about their chosen objects. The art teacher was quite elderly, and he was quite a reserved and somewhat mysterious fellow. He had also taken a shine to me as I was pretty good at art and more enthusiastic than the others. He makes his way around to me and I tell him I want to paint a skull. "And where do you plan on finding one?" he asks. I told him I had seen one of those plastic replica skeletons in the biology lab, and I was going to ask about borrowing the skull. He blew off that idea as if it were complete nonsense. He paused for a moment and then said a little more quietly, "I can get you a skull." Okay, I replied, not knowing what he was getting at really. The guy goes off into his little storeroom, rummages for a couple minutes, and comes back with a real human skull in his hand. I politely asked him how he came by a real human skull. He turned his gaze away pensively and said, "An old friend gave it to me," and left it at that. Not a teacher, but when I was in 7th grade, I drew a picture in my art class sketchbook of Barney and Elmo smoking pot and drinking booze, drawn with colored pencils and all. I showed it to my friends, and they thought it was the funniest thing they'd ever seen. The art teacher, however, was not pleased and sent me to the principal's office. The principal then looked through my sketchbook and ripped out all the drawings she deemed as inappropriate. It shattered my soul that day, and I cried for some time afterwards. In fact, I think that's what ended my dream of becoming an artist. Screw you, Mrs. Moreno and Mrs. McKeon, for robbing me of a better future. When I was around 8 or 9, I got into drawing cars, and simultaneously into drawing tribal decorations. Probably not PC, but, you know, the type a lot of people get as a tattoo. So, I drew a car with a tribal decal, and because of the hook-like shapes in the tribal decal, I, inappropriately, named the car, quote, the Hooker. When she was done laughing, my mom took the time to explain the world's oldest profession. Whenever I got to draw something on my own, I just drew cake. I rarely let them draw whatever because they inevitably would draw predictable cliches. 8th grade boys would draw knives with blood dripping, or an eye, and girls a unicorn. Trying to get them to draw from life was tough. Not an art teacher, but for 1 year I was a preschool teacher a few years back. It was like a Friday at 4 p.m. in the winter. I gave the kids some time to color or draw whatever they wanted. 10 minutes go by, and one of my students, 4 at the time, who I had a love-hate relationship with because he caused a lot of behaviors but could be a sweet kid when he wanted to, came up to me and said, "Look, Mrs. Blank, I made a drawing for you." I gave a warm smile and asked him to show it to me. It was a drawing of his parents doing the nasty. He even got the shaft part right with balls and everything. Totally shocked but remained as neutral as possible because I knew if I reacted in a major way, he would have continued to make more drawings like this. This is something I learned about him. So I said, "Let's put that in your backpack and we can show mommy when she picks you up." Dad comes that day. More embarrassing for me. I told him about the drawing and he turned bright red, explaining the other night he had walked in on them screwing. We awkwardly laughed about it, and that was that. In 9th grade, as an end-of-the-year project, we could basically draw whatever we wanted, and we had a week to do it. Me, being the little car nerd I am, drew the entire drivetrain and suspension of a Chevy K5 Blazer. I'm a teacher, but I don't teach art. I was teaching a class of 7-year-olds who are usually a blessing, but there's just one kid who has some real problems. He can't speak English at all. Even after me spending a year trying to teach him and all his classmates progressing well, he just refuses to engage with any teacher and is extremely disruptive, often crying and screaming. I think he has special needs, but that's not handled well in China. Anyway, after battling and battling with him to no avail, assigning him, quote, class police roles, everything, I just gave up this one day and gave him some paper to draw on whilst the rest of the kids learned without him distracting them. He drew a picture of me with a large pee-pee and lots of knives in me with blood and wrote my name in perfect English. It was eerie, but I just felt sad and concerned what had happened to this boy. The school gave him no support, and I only saw him for about an hour a week. I left the school shortly after, unrelated, and wonder how he is now. I'm an art teacher, but this story is about my substitute teacher. I asked my students what they had been drawing when I was gone. The class was absolutely silent, apart from some boys that were giggling. They were 13 years old. I asked what was so funny, and they said the substitute was great. At the same time, the girls seemed as they wanted to disappear from the classroom. So I asked why the teacher was great, and the boys just exploded. "He told us to draw flying cock-a-doodle-doo." Well, I don't have to say more than that substitute teacher never came to our school again. In junior high, my art teacher pulled me aside to tell me that she was really impressed because I could draw better than her. After that, she pretty much let me have free rein, as long as what I was drawing worked towards the lesson goal, such as shading, perspective, etc. For the end-of-year project, I did a Robotech Veritech fighter in stipple, drawn only using dots. The next year, when I would have had her again for art, she paid out of pocket for me to take an art course at the community college across the street. She was an absolutely amazing teacher. Not a teacher, but in middle school, we got an assignment in art class to draw a still life of fruit. I thought the idea was totally boring and decided to put a creative spin on it. I drew a bunch of different fruits all sitting in the seats of a coliseum watching an apple kill an orange in the center ring. I failed the assignment, and my teacher even pulled me out into the hallway to tell me directly that she didn't like me or the work that I produced. Didn't let that crush my dream though, and I kept making my assignments weirder and weirder to tick her off. Reminds me of that time I got suspended in kindergarten for drawing a crappy stick figure gun. I tried to save myself that day by saying it was a water gun, since it was so crappy you couldn't tell the difference. But they weren't having it, and little Plava 27 went home that day. Not an art teacher, but when I was in late elementary/early junior high, my art teacher at the time gave us free rein. I had just learned what furries and pokemorphs were at the time. My art teacher, thankfully, just thought I couldn't draw werewolves for crap. When I was in high school, I was trying to learn how to draw perspective for the first time, and I was doodling a wolf howling, mostly because I enjoy wolves, and there's plenty of references online that I could check my work against. However, a seated howling wolf, when viewed from the front, doesn't show eyes or ears or most of the face, just an upturned muzzle and chin. I was actually kind of glad of this at first, because I sucked at positioning wolf eyes properly. I could draw pretty eyes, and I could draw heads a little, but put the two together, and it all looked wrong. So anyway, I'm drawing this wolf, and I think I'm doing a fine job of it, and I've got the muzzle and a bit of nose and the cheeks and the neck and the chest and all that, and everything looked fine. I was actually kind of proud of it. At least, I was until I got home several hours later and pulled it out again to work on it. You see, what confronted me at the end of the day was not my howling wolf, but what looked remarkably like a fuzzy, vaguely cone-shaped shaft with some kind of diseased black tip, all perched atop 4 paws and a tail. I've never drawn a howling wolf from that perspective again. In 7th grade, we were supposed to draw a fish made out of smaller fish. A few days earlier, I had learned that seahorses are fish, and I was obsessed with this small tidbit of knowledge and made a seahorse out of small fish. I got into a discussion with my teacher about whether I did the assignment correctly or not. 30 minutes and a Google search later, I got a C, which, fair, I wasn't the best painter. Not an art teacher, but my daughter in 1st grade was given an assignment to write a story and draw. She wrote and drew a story about Horny the Rhino. It amazes me how you can have names for animals that describe their appearances, like Fluffy the cat, Scaly the lizard, or the blue-footed booby. Shoutouts to ornithologists for giving birds the best names. But as soon as you try and name a horned animal, you gotta get a little more creative, otherwise you end up like this 1st grader. When I was in the 1st grade, they had everyone in every grade draw something. It could be anything. I drew an evil snail that had gotten snatched up by a bird, and I had a voice bubble that said, "I will be back," or something like that, coming from this evil snail. In the foreground, I drew my family. That was it. That was the whole picture. Flash forward to like 6 months, and my really bad drawing was chosen as number 1 in the 1st grade. Then, the school had an assembly where they showed the top drawings from each grade. So, I go up to the front with the other winners, and the principal goes through each one and says a little something about it. Eventually, they get to my drawing, and I quickly realized why I was chosen. They thought the bird was a plane, and the evil snail was my dad leaving to deploy. Important note is that this school was on a military base. My dad had never been deployed and was in fact depicted on the ground with the rest of my family. But I just stood there and accepted the award, and I never told another living soul because I was so embarrassed and guilty. I can honestly say I was one of the better artists at my school, asked to draw for the paper, design t-shirts, mugs, etc., and voted outstanding senior in art. I taught calligraphy, and one of my logos became the state logo for the state science division. I'm also somewhat of a jerkwad. We were assigned an exercise to draw our offhand, left if you're right-handed, right if you're left-handed. I asked the teacher, "How far would you like us to draw to?" Her response, "Well, you can draw all the way up to your elbow or cut it off at the wrist. Your choice." So, I drew a cut it off at the wrist, with exposed bone, tissue, and pooling blood. She was real careful with her instructions after that. I was an art teacher for 4 years, and I have so many stories. So many stories. One that comes to mind is a drawing this strange little child who was oddly obsessed with me made me as a gift. Now, for context, my personal aesthetic is what my friends affectionately call, quote, adult tomboy goth, which is to say I wear all black, somewhat androgynous clothing, and have a penchant for the dark and absurd. Of course, in work environments, I dress more professionally, but my kids all knew I was a dark-humored little oddball and they loved me for it. So, this girl is doing free draw, and every time I walk over, she covers up the paper with her arm and hisses at me like a cat, as she was wont to do. After about an hour, she scurries over to me with this huge grin on her face and announces, Baba Yagatron, I made you a thing! And my lord, oh boy, it was the best gift I have ever received from a child. The drawing was of a skeleton beckoning a crying girl with no eyes into a pre-dug grave. The gravesite was elaborately mapped out with the whole underground portion where the coffin would be, a tombstone, and little flowers around the tombstone. I laminated it, and to this day it is still on my bedroom door, even after 3 moves around the country. I miss teaching.
Skyscraper window cleaners. What is the most bizarre thing you've ever seen on the job? Once while cleaning a high-rise apartment, an old lady kindly asked me if I was hungry and proceeded to open her window and hand me a pizza slice. So I sat there 27 stories up, tangling on my chair and eating pizza. It was a good day. Not as exciting as the other stories, but something I'm blown away by when I'm on ropes is how many people feel guilty about not working when I'm around. When you look into people's workstations, you can see that almost no one works. Most people are on Facebook, YouTube, or on news sites. But the second they notice me outside of the window, they quickly switch to an Excel spreadsheet. Like they think I'm some kind of productivity spy about to rat them out to management. Keep cruising the internet, people, don't mind me. And also, pointing to the window and saying, "You missed a spot," isn't funny. F you. I've been a rope access window cleaner for a couple of years and have seen my fair share of weirdness. A couple incidences that strike out are a young couple having fun that invited me to join, an apartment in a ritzy building completely empty other than a table with several sheets of freshly printed uncut $100 bills, a real goddamn mummy sarcophagus. Been offered several doobies, hits, and various adult beverages while hanging off the side of a building. Animals were always my favorite though. Cats and puppies lose their minds seeing you outside their window and will happily chase your mop and squeegee while you work. Always brighten the day. Another memorable moment was causing a mild panic in the dining room of a local retirement home dementia ward. We felt bad and went as quickly as we could, but the nurses laughing their butts off as they tried to contain the pandemonium made us feel slightly better. Not a skyscraper window washer, but was a janitor who had to wash the windows in a 6-story building as part of my job. So I used a mix of ladders and rappelling down from the roof with a harness to clean the windows outside. One day I was washing the outside windows on the executive floor where all the bosses and higher-up employees had their offices. I was done with one window, so I moved to the next window and looked in and saw the CEO of the company snorting something in his office with the door locked and the lights off. He looked up and saw me in the window, and we made an uncomfortable eye contact for about 15 seconds. Then I just pretended I saw nothing and kept washing the windows. Never spoke a word about it to him or anyone in the office, but the last day I worked there, he gave me a farewell card with $200 in it and a free solar-powered portable phone charger that the company produced and sold. Hey, is this Riley Freeman in the future? Because this guy said no snitching. One time in college, I answered a help wanted ad for a window cleaner. I thought it was going to be one of those high-rise jobs. Instead, when I showed up to the interview, it was some disheveled-looking guy in a parking lot. I spent the day with him going from house to house, cleaning people's windows. He told me to pretend I was his nephew, and he kept introducing me to customers that way. Then, when we're cleaning windows, he kept telling me his fantasies of getting with housewives. It was super weird. Plus, he chewed tobacco and while driving would spit the juice between his legs onto the floor of his ratty truck. Then, at the end of the day, he told me it was just an audition and tried not to pay me. One of the strangest days of my life. I am a window cleaner, but not high-rise. The thing I can never understand is when I see lip prints where people have kissed the glass in public buildings. People, if you saw what I clean off of those every week, you would never touch the glass, especially not with your lips. Since a lot of people are asking when the glass is super dirty, it's usually grease, old condiments, bird poop, salt from the sidewalk, and a lot of the time I can't even tell what it is, I just know it looks and smells bad. My uncle is a former window cleaner, and he said his most memorable moments were when he lived and worked in Rotorua, which at the time was the crime capital of New Zealand. The most bizarre was when he saw some naked guy, obviously high on something, getting Benny Hill chased up and down a street by the police. The second most bizarre was when he heard a crash followed by a van tire bouncing down the street that was being chased by a massive Maori guy, who proceeded to throw the tire over his shoulder and wander off whistling as if nothing had happened. Not me, but my uncle has been doing it for years and had many weird encounters, but this one is kinda sad. Having changed companies, he started at this new apartment building. Near the top, there was this old lady with a dog. The dog was young and always excited to see him. Eventually, he started talking to this woman when he was working through a small window. They became somewhat friends. Then one day, almost a year on the job, he went up and for the first time, the apartment was empty except for the dog, which he found odd. So when he was finished up, he tried to check and see if she was in, but got no reply. A day later, a member of staff from the apartment block, I think it was the landlord but can't remember, got back to him and told him that she passed away and that she had no family. Assuming that my uncle knew her, the landlord asked about the dog, seeing if there was anything that could be done. My uncle, being the kind fella he was, took the dog. Nearly 10 years later, my uncle still has the dog, a little terrier named Pumpkin. A lot of y'all are going to be really jealous, but there's an attached image of Pumpkin and he's really cute. Well, I was watching the outside of the window at the group home I work at. State was coming by later that week and I was super bored. I walk up to one of my dude's bedroom windows to wash it off and apparently he hears me outside somehow, even though he had his radio turned up to about 9,000 like he always does. He rips up his blinds, totes naked and starts slapping himself repeatedly in the forehead and screaming. This was pretty normal for him, but it's definitely the strangest thing I've ever seen so far in my life while washing a window. What I got was a lot of flirting. I don't know if the pane of glass gave them a sense of safety or if a lot of office chicks are just bored or if our red overalls were particularly fetching, but something brought out the bachelorette instinct. Notes pressed against the glass, pretend lesbian performances, you name it. Only seemed to happen when there was a group of ladies though. My grandfather met my grandma while working as a window washer. He put his phone number right up against the glass of her office and hoped she wrote it down. She did, and called, and they've been married for 60 years. That is quite sweet. I wasn't expecting a story like that in here. My ex was a high-rise window cleaner and he always talked about the crazy things women did. It seems like the glass gives them a sense of security and they do things that I don't think they'd do if that glass wasn't there. Women flashing and pressing their chest against the glass, mooning and pressing their butt cheeks on the glass, writing their phone number and pressing it against the glass. There was one point where we were engaged and he would hold his finger up and point to his ring. It didn't seem to stop some of the women. In fact, it made some of them try harder, he said. He did say the hardest for him were the children's hospitals and when he'd clean the windows of the very sick children. This company did do the dress up as superheroes thing while they cleaned the windows, which made it fun for the kids, but he said it was still heartbreaking for them. I was in King's Cross in Sydney about 15 years ago when I finished my drop and landed on a lower roof. I witnessed a working girl giving a guy in a wheelchair, service. He looked at me and gave me a thumbs up, nearly fell over laughing. Window cleaner here. I have a few stories of cleaning high-rises that still make me chuckle. 1. My coworker, who no longer works there, always used to crap his pants, like had an issue, but never took care of it medically. I don't know, but it was always a joke. One day after lunch, we were strapping up to go over the site, and he turns to me and says, "Dude, how quickly do you think we can get this drop done?" Me, "It's only a 7-story, so maybe 30 minutes or so." Why? Him, "All right, let's go." It was a goofy edge, so sometimes we would hand each other our buckets of water. The second I handed him his water, he screams into my face, "God damn it!" What I witnessed next was probably the quickest descent I've ever seen as he's cursing the entire way down the rope. Absolute hilarity for clarification. Yes, he indeed crapped himself. Another story. Different co-worker, there were 3 of us that dropped next to each other. One of them loved screwing with people on the inside. This was a dorm about 25 stories or so. Near halfway down the building, you can really start swinging, and he yells at me and the other guy to swing over to him. On his drop was a college girl passed out on the windowsill. Him, on the count of 3, slam your suction cups on the glass and scream. We proceeded to scare the living crap out of this poor girl. She fell off the sill almost immediately. It ended with everyone laughing. She took a selfie with us and she later met us at the bottom of the building and punched all of us playfully. She had a good spirit about it. I was once cleaning a skyscraper where I know nearly everyone that works there. I saw a job interviewer having gay sex with another guy, probably someone he interviewed. The interviewer, who is straight, married, and has kids, gave me $500 not to tell anyone. Easiest money I ever made. He didn't snitch. Riley Freeman would be proud. My uncle has been doing this job for over 20 years, so I've heard a few weird stories from him. 1. A woman filming smut. 2. A sign on a window asking them not to clean the bathroom window. Obviously, not knowing which window was to what room, they went about their jobs. The bathroom had skinned rabbits hung up. 3. A hoarder whose windows were slowly being hidden by the years of collections. 4. A famous footballer who was not with his wife. Not long after this, the company were asked to sign NDAs. 5. What looked like a murder scene. Uncle reported it, but was later told it was fake blood for a TV show that was filming there. His favorite, number 6, a dog breeder. Okay, breeder might not be the right word. Someone who had 2 litters, and every 4 weeks he went back to clean the building and got to see the pups growing up. When he went back there, and they were roughly 12 weeks, there was 1 pup left. He asked for her, and now he's got a rottie called Holly. There was a point where I was thinking to myself, I bet this is just going to be repeatedly, I saw 2 people getting it on, but you know what, that's actually been pretty scarce. I don't clean windows, but I work from scaffolding and do rope access work on high-rises and skyscrapers in New York City all the time. It's not that often I see something bizarre, and I'll see into hundreds of apartments a year, so I honestly feel many of the posts in here are made up. Sure, you occasionally see the caught-off-guard tenant, but if you do see someone, they usually just wave and shut their curtains/blinds. The most bizarre thing I've seen, though, has to be when I found a section of loose brick about 15 stories up. I removed them to put them in my satchel as usual and found dozens of used condoms shoved behind the brick. Like, how the hell? I still have no idea to this day. I think our friendly neighborhood Spider-Man has been doing some freaky stuff with Mary Jane, and he's hiding his used condoms behind that brick like squirrels storing their nuts for winter. Dropped in on a dude throwing kitchen knives at a dartboard and an undersized pink robe. Skipped that window. I work for my dad's window cleaning business in Scotland, and while cleaning a couple windows, ground floor bungalows, I stumbled across the couple having sex in the living room window. They made eye contact with me and didn't stop. Probably the most awkward experience of my life, but you better believe I finished the job and took my £20 tip. Maybe you haven't thought about this that much, but I'm pretty sure they used you as an accessory, mate. We don't do high-rises, but I've seen my fair share of nudity. One dude was doing calisthenics buck naked in front of his window overlooking the lake. Another trip to the same house and his wife dropped her robe and took a bath, knowing full well we were there. I think these people overestimate how strong their tint is. Favorite story involves two new guys on a roof washing some skylights. I'm on the ground having a chat with the homeowner when I get a text that says, "We can see someone in the shower. Great chest." I thought, weird, I'm talking to the wife right now. Who are they looking at? A few minutes later, and her heavy-set husband comes outside with wet hair. There's also the time I took a dump in the backyard of an NHL player's house, but that's a bit off topic. When I used to work as a window cleaner for a building in West Hollywood, I would often see lots of famous people in the building. Not mega famous people, but kinda well-known actors and such. One day I was just cleaning the window as normal. This particular window had the blinds down while I was cleaning. One side of the blinds broke down and I saw a celebrity licking his dog's junk. I can't erase that image. It wasn't a high-rise, but I used to be a residential window washer, and sometimes clients would want the inside cleaned in addition to the outside. First worst was a morbidly obese man who was living at home, I believe on hospice care, but definitely at least with a full-time nurse. The man chain-smoked inside his house non-stop. When we cleaned the inside, the water was yellow coming off the glass. Second was the home of the city's university president. Absolutely disgusting. We would find old dog crap lying around. Walked into their kitchen, dishes were everywhere, and a frying pan had a couple of photos soaking in some kind of oil grease. That just sounds like an absolute pigsty. Does anyone remember that show, How Clean Is Your House? Ex-repelling window cleaner here. Saw a co-worker mix up his main line with his safety line. The harness was rated for the thicker rope and he never engaged. He fell 5 stories before bouncing off an entryway overhang made of concrete and hitting the ground. Nothing too crazy, but I worked for my stepdad's company who had very sketchy equipment and no safety ropes or vests to make sure you don't plunge to certain death or permanent injury. We used the stack ladders. These ladders are very hard to assemble if you lacked upper body strength. Also, you very much want someone at the bottom holding you if you stacked 3 or more ladders. For gravity and sudden strong winds, that'll make you regret every decision you've ever made in your life when you get hit by one. Typing this out, our dangerous setup is the craziest part of this story. Anyways, I had 6 ladders stacked and I'm cleaning a 3rd-story window at a private residence, and as soon as I make the climb up the ladder into the window, I scared the crap out of a parrot sitting in a cage on the other side. This frickin' parrot lets out this shriek that scared the crap out of me because I didn't see the parrot at first. I was already nervous being 3 stories up on a sketchy ladder. I swear I almost fell backwards. I just hugged the ladder and wet myself and had to go back down because I was so shook. Climbing down was so nervous, and I've done it with ease before, but once you get used to it, and a short guy like I am, you don't get scared unless an unexpected parrot frickin' screams at you. My opa was a window washer. 2 things stand out. Once, he helped the police find a robber who was hiding. My opa had a bird's eye view. Another was when he saved a nurse in a psych ward who had been taken hostage by a patient. Dude had locked himself inside a room with her, and my opa had the master key. He went in and tackled the guy. Both times were back before the platforms. He'd hang outside of the windows with a leather belt that attached to a hook on the outside of both sides of the window. Well, your opa sounds like a pretty good guy. My buddy is a window cleaner over here in Philly, and last week on the job he was cleaning the windows, and a flock of birds started to attack him. He fell off of the platform, dangled there hanging from his safety harness, and fought back with his squeegee as a weapon. Not window washing related, but I feel like this story goes along the type of glimpsing into windows vibe that you're looking for. My wife and I moved into our apartment about 5 years ago, and pretty shortly afterward, a house was built right across the alley from us. No big deal, it's kind of a developing suburb, whatever. It was cool watching a house go up from an empty lot over the course of however many months. Well, the house house was built and then a year went by and there were never any people around. Never a car in the driveway, never kids running around or any sign that anybody was moving in. But there were always lights on. Like, it was kinda just on display. For a couple of years it seemed like some real estate company just decided to build a house and never got around to selling it. This isn't that weird. There's a lot of property and houses for sale in our area. We were convinced that it was literally just a big, empty house. One night, wife and I decided to just look inside the one of the back windows because, hey, big empty houses are cool. The backyard was still kind of an empty dirt lot and there was no fence. It was literally a 15-foot walk from where we would park our car every night. So honestly, not trying to do anything creepy, just trying to see what the interior of this big, new house looked like, we walked up and looked. Following our line of sight, our view was through the exterior window into what looked like a nice kitchen, past that a hallway, and directly through the open door of a bathroom where we saw an elderly woman with white, disheveled hair sitting on the toilet, weeping. We had no idea this house was inhabited at all, and we just witnessed what seemed like a pretty intimate moment. Or maybe every moment in that house was like that, who knows? We felt like we crossed such a line, it was so disturbing and unsettling. We went straight into our apartment and went to bed. The house is still there. We have no idea who actually lives there. Top 5 of one of the weirdest, most uncomfortable moments of my life. Honestly, if that were me, the next day I would have knocked on the door, explained that I had no idea someone lived there, and just, seen if the lady needed anything or if something was wrong. And yeah, I know, it's not a window cleaning story, but I thought it was kind of funny. I worked as a commercial window cleaner for 2 years in the 90s, and one of my many window cleans involved cleaning the air traffic control tower glass. The controller had to visually identify the planes as they talked to the pilots. Anyway, after one of my not-so-good window washing efforts, the controller wrongfully identified an aircraft through his window and refused a passenger plane access to the runway. This cost many thousands in extra fuel and delayed several flights for the day. I lost my job and my employer lost the contract, all because of that damn middle bit of the window. Not only did you ruin your own day, but you also ruined the day of many other people. My God, what a catastrophic event to come from poorly cleaning a window. I'm not even sure if that's true though, because I'm pretty sure you have like codes and stuff you have access to get onto like airfields or strips or something like that, because I've flown a plane and I'm pretty sure I remember the main pilot that I was like flying with or who was watching my experience was telling me about these things. Not a window washer, but an engineer who does bosun chair drops for inspection or testing. We sometimes have hoses, so everybody thinks we're the window washers anyway. One residential tower, I got to a room with a doctor's examination table, with the stirrups used in a gynecological exams in a bedroom. The rest of the room definitely wasn't a doctor's office. On a shelf on the wall, a lot of toys, like dozens of them. Never got to see anybody going at it on a job, but I could hear them one time. Some guy had a bearded dragon almost fully grown just crawling around its office. It scared the living daylights out of me. Not a window washer, but a commercial window glazer. I was working on something like the 5th floor of a university campus office building. Sometimes we do windows that butt up to each other, so we caulk in between them with heavy-duty caulk. With this caulk, it is extremely common that we lick our middle fingers and use that to tool the caulk smooth. Gross, I know. We do that all the time. We can't see inside if there is anyone in there hardly ever. Well, some lady thought we were gesturing to her in an asexual way and called security on us. Oh, I don't know why this just reminded me of a misunderstanding of my own, where in high school my friends and I were messing around with my football and it went down the stairs, so I went to pick it up and my head accidentally went under a year 11 girl's skirt when I was in like year 8, I think, so all I see is her butt or something, and she turns around and goes, "You perv," and slaps me across the face. She slapped the crap out of me. And I'm just standing there like a bundle of nerves trying to be like, no, I went to pick up my ball. It's just, no. Not a window cleaner, but I inspect high-rise buildings' facades using the same type of scaffolding. We were doing a 53-story apartment building, and one of the apartments had a doll room. All of the dolls were incredibly creepy and looked very similar to the doll from Saw. I gotta say, Saw is one of those franchises I have never been able to get into. The torture aspect, I think, is what gets me. Like, I like a good horror movie or a slasher. The Scream trilogy by Wes Craven is honestly one of my favorite trilogies, actually. My girlfriend also showed me Texas Chainsaw Massacre recently, which I thought would be absolutely terrifying ever since I was a kid. Like, Leatherface freaked me out as a child, honestly. Then again, lots of things did, like Chucky. But no, it was well good, and I really love that stuff. But Saw, nah.
Has a doctor ever misdiagnosed you? If so, how did it affect you? In my high school, my history teacher was misdiagnosed with cancer. I saw her go from depression to acceptance to anger in a span of 6 months. After she found out, I remember her asking the class if any of our parents were lawyers. I felt really bad for her. She was already thinking how to say goodbye to her 7-year-old. Not quite the same, but similar happened to me, only for a short time. I was at the ER coughing with pain, etc. I had x-rays done and my husband and I were waiting for the results. A doctor came in and told us he had bad news and that I had cancer. We were shocked, and I started to cry. He looked at my name tag and said he'd be back. 10 minutes later, another doctor came in to tell me I had pneumonia and they would start treatment straight away. We asked about the cancer, but she didn't have any idea what we were talking about. Probably the only time I've been happy to have pneumonia. Our neighbor across the road had the reverse happen. The doctors kept telling her there was nothing wrong with her. By the time they finally diagnosed her breast cancer, it was too late. She was dead within a few months at 28, leaving a husband and 4 young children. I guess this is why hypochondriacs exist. When I was 14, I was told I was pregnant after getting an ultrasound to check my kidneys due to high blood pressure. No pregnancy test, no questions. I was a young girl, so I obviously was pregnant after they found an abnormal mass. Ended up being a cyst. None of the doctors would listen to me when I said that I had never even kissed a boy before. The sad part of the story was that after the doctor told my dad and me that I was 10 weeks pregnant, I adamantly denied that it was even possible. My dad actually stood up for me and took my side. The doctors then called my mom and accused my father of sexually assaulting me. Eventually, I was sent to a women's hospital and 2 hours later confirmed that I was not the Virgin Mary. Physically, it didn't affect me, but I've been very wary of going to doctors since. Sounds to me like that doctor thought he was frickin' House or something. But in all fairness, to some degree, I can kind of understand the wariness of some of these things. I ditched my GP after she accused me, an overweight and wearing an empire dress, of being pregnant and making me lay down on the exam table so she could feel my stomach. I didn't even get the dignity of peeing on a stick. She decided the best way to decide whether I was pregnant or not was to knead my stomach and declare it nice and soft. Grossish alert. My grandmother went to the doctor for blood in her stool and told her it was hemorrhoids. She asked him to perform some tests because she didn't believe it was just hemorrhoids. He refused and told her to come back if the H medication didn't work. It didn't, and it turns out she had colon cancer. It was so far along by this point that she passed 6 months after her diagnosis. Maybe some people would disagree, but I think if I told the doctor to give me tests because it would put my mind at ease or something, or it might make you discover something that might be even more wrong with me than we first imagined, then by God, I'm going to make them do it. Age 1. You have nerve damage from spina bifida that affects your bladder. Here, take this medicine and learn how to pee through a straw. Age 12. Oh, the medicine isn't working. Are you sure you're using it correctly? Age 16. Here, try Ditropan again. Age 21. Here, try bladder Botox. Age 22. Oh, hold up, there's something weird about your bladder. You also have a second ureter on your left kidney. Age 23. Yeah, you have a hole in your bladder that's probably congenital. There since birth. Wait 6 months and we'll get you in to fix that up. I've had multiple MRIs since birth, and apparently the second ureter and the hole in the bladder was somehow missed. I'm still waiting for the surgery date. I also want to make it clear that I have no ill thoughts about anyone who missed my diagnosis for so long. Stuff happens, and it's definitely not a reflection on my healthcare system. I'm more annoyed at my own body for being so messed up to begin with. The only person I'm annoyed with is the guy that told me I wasn't trying hard enough, and he's dead now, so I can't even be like, in your face, jerk. Personally, I think that's real cope, to be honest. No, your healthcare system really sucks if through 23 years of, having this checked out and no one really noticed this. I don't know, that's just my opinion. A psychologist I was seeing once gave me schizoaffective disorder, but walked it back to a temporary psychotic episode a few weeks later. Spent those few weeks in a state of shock and disbelief, though. Horrendous pain, vomiting. ER doc says that I have a lot of stool. I told the doctor that he wasn't the first person to tell me that I was full of crap, but that there was something else wrong. Another doctor says the same thing. I am becoming belligerent because of this nonsense and the excruciating pain. Third opinion doctor orders CT. I had gangrene on my appendix and it was hours from rupturing. Midnight emergency surgery. 5 days in the hospital. If I went along with what they had initially said, I would be dead. I went to an ER after driving to 12 feet. I heard something like a crackle and pool water drizzling down my throat through my ear, and immense pain. Upon describing this to the doctor at the ER, he diagnosed it as an ear infection, a 0 to full-blown ear infection, which had nothing to do with the dive, the nose, or the fact that pool water has very distinct taste when it runs down the back of your throat. At my ear specialist, who I saw as soon as possible, I was correctly diagnosed with barotrauma. The effect from the first doctor was unnecessary agony for 24 hours because he apparently didn't get paid enough to listen to anything beyond the symptoms. At least in the end, it was a full recovery. When I was 15, my GP told my mum that the crippling pain below my sternum, the very upper part of my abdomen, was heartburn, and he prescribed antacids, ignoring the fact that this pain would literally have me on the floor in the fetal position crying. Heartburn. So, of course, the medicine doesn't work, and I deal with this pain several times a week for 4 years, until I'm 19 and deployed to Iraq. Thankfully, my NCO wouldn't listen when I had an attack and told him it'd pass. He sent me to our clinic. They draw blood, it's pancreatitis, secondary to gallstones. They removed my gallbladder and it got much better. I still have rare acute pancreatitis that I believe is from the damage of 4 years' worth of stones passing through my duct, that quack. You know, I think the closest thing to any of these stories that I had is when I broke my foot. I went to the school nurse and she was like, it's fine, it's just a bruise. I was like, no, I literally can't walk, I'm going to the hospital. I went to my pediatrician when I was 19 about pains I had been having in my back. They were in a specific location, a bit left of my spine, center height, and would come suddenly, be quite intense, and then go away for a while. It wasn't a new feeling, but they were getting worse. She chalked it up to my anterior pelvic tilt, poor posture, lack of exercise, and prescribed me some workouts to do. It wasn't bad thinking on her part, as I wasn't in great shape at the time, but it definitely felt like she didn't take my symptoms very seriously. Maybe I didn't do a good enough job conveying the intensity. About a year later, I was at my parents' house, made myself a box of Kraft mac and cheese, and wound up in by far the most pain I've ever experienced. It's hard to describe the pain without sounding hyperbolic, but I'll say I was sat in a chair trying not to breathe and thinking about how long I could last before jumping headfirst over the balcony railing into the floor below. I can say with confidence I will never feel more physical pain, which is a strange thought. Fire department came to the house but were afraid to move me, thinking I had pinched a nerve. After a couple of hours in the chair, the pain somewhat suddenly vanished, and I had my dad drive me to the ER. Got to the ER, had an ultrasound, which was awesome, and the docs found that my gallbladder was stuffed with gallstones. Not just a couple, but dozens, and 2 of them were about the size of quarters, which is also about the width of a gallbladder. These 2 stones alone were actually filling my gallbladder side to side. My gallbladder was also completely infected and had been for some time. Lots of WTF faces on the doctors that day. Turns out the stones had been building for years. They estimated that it started in middle school, and I had just gotten used to the random pain somehow. Pretty weird looking back on it. Anyway, they ripped that crap right out of me, and life's been a lot better since. I was just not diagnosed. Horrendously painful periods from the age of 9. I could barely get out of bed or go to school. They were heavy as well. My doctor, an older man, told me and my mother to suck it up, that it was all part of being a woman. I was depressed and lived like this for 9 years, barely getting out of bed for a week, at least a month, and missing heaps of school. Then I got pregnant at 17, which I now know is a miracle. Had my first ultrasound and my ovaries were covered in endometrial cysts. I tried to give birth naturally, but all the endometriosis and scarring made it impossible, so I had a C-section. After my C-section, the endometriosis held on to my C-section incision, causing severe pain, and unfortunately 2 more operations before that was cleared. I lived in severe pain for so long because my doctor thought periods should be painful. They shouldn't. If I had been diagnosed earlier, my body could have been prepared for pregnancy, though D's and C's and other procedures which could have made my pregnancy, birth, and recovery much easier. I went to the doctor with really bad food poisoning and he told me it was nothing and that I should eat something like digestives, Graham biscuits because I hadn't eaten for 3 days. Turns out that's absolutely the worst thing you can do with salmonella as it strips your stomach lining. It felt like I'd eaten a bunch of razor blades. I ended up in hospital for the pain and nobody told me what was wrong with me until after I was released. I would never have known if it wasn't for the phone call from the Center of Communicable Diseases. At risk of sounding stupid, I actually had no idea that's what salmonella does to you. I was misdiagnosed as having pneumonia. Pneumonia would have been preferable. I left work early one day because there was an extremely sharp pain in my back, just under my shoulder blade as well as just underneath my ribcage on the same day. I was also having difficulty breathing. I miraculously managed to drive to the ER. In hindsight, I'm aware it was a dumb idea and got checked in. They gave me some non-narcotic painkillers, did some x-rays and ran a few other tests. The doctor came in after a while and said I had pneumonia, gave me a prescription for a Z-Pack or whatever it's called and discharged me. I had just driven out of the hospital and got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I answered and they said they were from the hospital. They requested for me to come back as quickly as I could. Don't bother checking in, just go straight back to the room I just left. I went back into the room and the doctor told me that they had looked at my x-rays again. Turns out my lung had collapsed. They rushed a specialist in immediately, like 10 minutes maybe, and were getting me prepped for surgery. Everything went pretty smoothly and everyone was extraordinarily nice to me. I'm positive everyone was so nice because there were definitely grounds for a lawsuit. I wasn't looking to get rich off anyone though, I just wanted to breathe again. I had extremely good insurance with the company I was with at the time. I paid $100 for the emergency room fee and the rest of the $1,700 bill was covered, so that was nice. While I was in there, a shirt popped up on the woot.com and I bought it immediately. It read Lifetime Achievement Award for Breathing, Respiring Since Birth. I was in the hospital for almost not getting that very achievement. It was fate. I still have the shirt somewhere, but I got fat and it doesn't fit now. I've been told that quite a few people visited me while I was in the hospital. I don't remember most of them. I was on a bunch of diluted while I was awake. I do remember a buddy asking me how I peed with all the wires and the monitors attached to me and responding simply with my penis. He looked at my mom and said, "He'll be fine. He's too much of a butthole to die." Overall, I would rate having a collapsed lung as a terribly awful experience. You never really think about how much you breathe until you can't. It sucks. A lot. I'm certain I can imagine. Not me, but my mom. A few months ago, she was having this horrible pain in her lower abdomen, sides, and back. We put her symptoms into a symptom checker app, and one of the diagnoses that came up was an ectopic pregnancy. For those who don't know what that is, it's when the embryo begins forming in the fallopian tubes. When this is the case, it's pretty much a guarantee the baby won't make it, and it puts the mother's life at serious risk too. Anyway, silly little symptom app. Who cares? A few days later, she went to the doctor and got her blood tests done. The doctor came back with the results and told her she was pregnant. My mom knew it wasn't possible to have been recently, so she starts freaking out that the ectopic pregnancy is the case. And that's exactly what the doctor thought too. Meanwhile, every nurse and doctor in the building was rushing around, freaking out, trying to get her to the specialist. But they were too busy. So they started calling ambulances to rush her to the hospital. Amid all the chaos, the doctor approaches my crying mother and apologizes, saying he was looking at the wrong blood results. Blood results of hers almost exactly 3 years prior. She currently has a 2.5-year-old. Not exactly a misdiagnosis, but rather an unlucky train wreck of events. Anyways, when I was 14, I had appendicitis. Got home from school one Friday and thought I had a bad stomach ache. Got worse and worse, and finally on Sunday night, it burst. And yet, even then, my parents and I were just starting to think it might be my appendix. It was late that Sunday, so we decided to wait till morning. Side note, when I went into the ER, I was so sick I was hunched over and actually slightly pooped my pants. Went into the ER and got diagnosed, but had to wait another 7 hours to be absolutely sure that it was appendicitis because reasons. By the time they wheeled me into the OR, I was vomiting black bile. Woke up from surgery feeling slightly better, but totally knocked out from all the substances. Then my pain started to get worse, and the doctor told me I had an abscess in my abdomen because we waited so long to do the appendectomy. I had two options: get surgery, which would be a surefire but painful way to drain it, or be transferred to their main campus about 15 minutes away and do a procedure to put a drain into it. The drainage would take about about a week. I opted for the week-long drain. The operation was successful, and a week later, I'm halfway out the door with the drain still in me as doctors are telling me how to take care of it at home. Then they drew my blood and saw that my white blood cell count was through the roof and made me stay again. I mean, my mom and I were packed up and I was dressed in actual clothes for the first time in a week. I was devastated. We were presented the same options as last time, but I opted for the surgery. As I was being prepped for this surgery, my doctor told me it would only take about an hour. Ended up being 6 hours. The abscess had been in my abdomen for so long that it had inflamed my intestines so badly they shredded my large intestines to near shreds. This was a laparoscopic surgery. My parents were told their son was still on the operating table after a 3-hour delay and given 2 choices: remove the damaged part of my intestines and run the risk of never being able to eat some foods ever again, or getting an ileostomy bag. They chose the latter. I woke up in the middle of the night in the ICU, completely zonked out and hearing my dad snore behind me. When I came to, I noticed the giant bulging red thing on my stomach with a bag over it, and it was moving. To say I was confused would be a wicked understatement. When the doctor came in the morning, they explained to me what that thing was. As they did, I wondered when I was going to get it off. I asked, "How long will this be on me? Like 3 weeks?" Bewildered, my doctor said, "That's going to be on you for at least 3 to 6 months. Floored, flabbergasted, at a complete loss for words. No words can describe the confusion and complete bewilderment that I had in that moment. I was in shock for the next week until one nurse asked if I wanted to name it Jeffrey the Stoma. Gone but never forgotten. She changed my outlook on the whole situation. If I was going to have this bag of poop hanging from my stomach, might as well make the most of it. It wasn't easy. I had to cut most of the foods I normally ate, like greasy stuff, out of my diet, since it went straight through my small intestines and into the bag like water. The bag would constantly spill in the middle of the night and I'd wake up covered in poop. But I made it. Surgery day finally arrived 4 months later and Jeffrey was gone. And then things went from bad to worst in a matter of minutes. I was sitting in the play area they had since I was in the pediatric wing and wanted to walk about. This was about 3 days after the surgery. I was being visited by a friend at that time when I got a sharp pain in my stomach, but it was easily ignorable. It got progressively worse. My thought process went like this: I'll be fine. I'll just take some pain meds when I get back to my bed. I'll see if I can ask for pain meds right now since I'm carrying my IV around with me anyways. I'm going to die, aren't I? Literally minutes before I was walking around by myself with little to no help. Now I was screaming in pain, trying to even lift myself off the couch and into a wheelchair. We waited a week when we decided that I needed another surgery and probably would have another ostomy. 2 side notes. 1. I spent my 15th birthday eating ice chips. 2. Because I was so dejected that I was getting another ostomy right before my surgery, my mom went and got me a small amount of what I had been craving all week: apple juice. I hadn't been able to eat or drink for the whole week, so that juice was still the greatest thing I've ever tasted in my life. I told the doctor right before, and he silently put a finger up to his lips and smiled. Awesome dude. After the surgery, they found an entire liter of feces that was spilling out due to the intestine reconnection failure. I had also been incredibly bloated and looked pregnant, says my mom. The failed surgery left me in the ICU for a week, barely managing to even stay alive, let alone awake for more than 15 minutes at a time. I just laid in my bed for an entire week, sweating, probably gallons of sweat every day, and watching Food Network and requesting that my mom make that when I go out. I recovered from the ICU, then got out a week later with another ostomy bag. Didn't even bother naming this one because at this point I just wanted to be done with the medical problems forever. 6 months later, in the middle of my freshman year of high school, I got it removed once and for all, and thus ends my story. What a champ you are. I could not imagine being in the hospital for that long. I think I broke my foot in high school and I was there for maybe a week or so and I was utterly miserable. So, 6 months. I was told by the receptionist at A&E that I should go home because it's probably a migraine. It was bacterial meningitis. I am overweight. I don't sleep enough. I am exhausted all the time. I bruise easily. It feels like I have the full body arthritis on a bad day. For years, my doctor has said, "You're fat. Lose weight." For years, I have refined my diet, upped my activity level. I got a little less fat, still didn't sleep, body hurt more. Brain tumor. It was a tumor. Granted, the best kind of tumor, small and benign. It destroyed my self-confidence. I went through years of frustration and self-doubt. My health continued to suffer as the tumor grew and completely shut down my endocrine system. And let me tell you, dealing with a non-functioning endocrine system is something else. But at least I know now what is wrong. That sounds like it friggin' sucks. Like, I'm someone who cares a lot about their personal fitness and everything, but it must suck when you go to the doctors and every time it's like, oh, you're fat. That's the reason why anything's wrong with you. It's because you're fat. And you're just sat there like, can we run some tests or maybe explore some other possibilities? Because I think it's more than that. It's like, no, it's because you're fat. On that note, though, if you're happy with your body the way that it is, I'm glad for you. But keep in mind that your personal physical fitness and health is all your personal responsibility, and obesity does cause its own fair share of issues.
To the doctors of Reddit, what is it like when you have a doctor's appointment? I avoid disclosing I'm a doctor unless specifically asked what I do for work. I think I'm better taken care of when the doc/team is most comfortable and working in their routine. Difficult and demanding patients who request special treatment often have worse outcomes. I don't want to be one of them. I completely agree. I never tell them I'm a doctor. Same thing when I take my kids to a pediatrician. I just want to be treated like a regular patient. Only exception was when I broke my hand and needed it operated on ASAP, not 10 days later. Being an ER resident, I always wonder which one of my co-residents is working in the emergency department as I drive home from a shift, knowing if something were to happen, they would be checking my rectal tone in front of all my coworkers. And then I think about how big their hands are. With my mom, it was like this. Mom, I think I have basal cell carcinoma on my back, but I can't see it quite clearly. Derm, you do have basal cell carcinoma. Good job. Went to student health as a med student. Attending I worked with the week before does my PAP. With the resident, he asked, I said yes. Kept quizzing me. What am I looking for? What does it mean if the PAP is positive? Etc. I'm getting questions right, but he's being real weird about it. Realized in parking lot after appointment, he was asking the resident, not me. Rotate with said resident a few months later. Bad. Because I can see all the shortcuts they're taking and I'm aware of the examination they should be doing but aren't. Edit. I should clarify, because I'm afraid it might have given the wrong impression. Most physicians I've met seem to know what they're about, but it's easy to spot areas where you would have done something differently, and the negative examples always stick out more than the positive. The example I was thinking of was this. I didn't learn I had scoliosis until my first week of medical school. It's mild, as scoliosis goes, but I have back and/or neck pain every day. So, I went to a local MD to get checked out and see if I should be worried. I wait for 2 hours to get in. Said MD takes a cursory history, doesn't ask any of the right questions, family history of this condition, when did it start, has it worsened, etc., and in the physical exam, barely touches my back. I knew the tests they needed to do and the questions she should have asked because I was in medical school. I was there for her experience and advice. I got neither. A better doctor, or more realistically, one with more time to see patients, would have said, hey, I don't know anything about scoliosis. You need to see someone who does. Or hey, actually knowing how to deal with a reasonably common condition would have been nice, I suppose, but I don't know, I'm a lowly resident. Edit 2. Whoa, never had this many notifications before. To answer a few questions, number 1, this does not qualify as professional medical advice. If you have a medical problem, you should go see your doctor in the meat space. If you do have scoliosis, I would look around for a doctor who A, is an MD/DO with an orthopedics background, whether as an actual orthopod or sports med, or B, is a practicing DO, you'll have to Google it, who does OMT and is familiar with scoliosis. Just my 2 cents. Opinions on chiropractors vary wildly in the medical community, and I won't get into that here because frankly, I'm not informed enough to comment. Number 2. Several people have asked how this uppity med student knew anything in his first week of med school. Fair question. I was told I had scoliosis in the first week of med school. It was 6 months to a year before I got it checked out. Never had time to do anything those first 2 years, especially not go to the doctor. Number 3. As others have pointed out, never be afraid to seek a second opinion. Doctors are human, and even hyper-educated humans make mistakes. Not only that, but frequently, diseases don't present the same way in the same patient every day of the year. Things can be messy in the real world. Complicated diagnoses may take time and may have to work through alternative diagnoses to get to the truth. Male gynecologist here. When I have a patient come in for a PAP, it is always a bit annoying when they leave their underwear on under the gown. I have to step out of the room and wait for them to remove it. When I went in for my first physical in years, I stripped naked under the paper gown. Apparently, guys don't do this. They leave their underwear on. Who knew? My family doc, who is also my best friend, had a good laugh at my expense over this breach in etiquette. He also texted me the night before to let me know he was putting the KY in the fridge for my exam. Not a doctor, but was a medical assistant in an OBGYN practice for a while. We were near a very large medical center, so would regularly get physician patients. My favorite was this physician couple who would come in for pregnancy check-ins and refuse to let me take the woman's blood pressure. The husband would bring his own stethoscope and BP cuff, and they would sit down into this weird, intimate BP taking ritual that took forever while I just kind of stood off to the side. I told the doc I was working with about it, and she's like, "It's okay. I know them. They're like that. I'll take it again when I see her." So weird. It truly depends on the way you act. Most of the time, I won't tell the doctor that I'm also a doctor unless specifically asked about it or if there is a slip of my tongue about symptoms or any other medical words. Some doctors tend to be not too specific when they know you're a doctor because, quote, "you already know what's happening." Sometimes, even my wife gets the "ask your husband to clarify your questions." I try to have an open mind when I'm the patient because we are trained to think the worst, so there is a lot of cancer in my mind. Currently, I work in a palliative care unit. I have had medical patients and carers, and I would say that it is truly diverse how they react. We are also human and we are sick and vulnerable. The doctor vein can go completely off or go on overdrive. Turning it off is better and less intrusive most of the time. The test results came in. It's bad news. You're not subscribed to Am I the Genius or Am I the Jerk, linked in the description below, and you haven't liked the video either. But it's not too late to turn your life around. Please, subscribe. It's for the better. Just kidding. Thanks for watching. Not a doctor, but whenever my dad, who is a doctor, took me in for an appointment when I was a kid, it was always super awkward because if anything was done even remotely incorrectly, he'd basically do the medical equivalent of the "let me speak to your manager" routine. Which I kind of understand in that context, since it's your kid's health you're talking about and not a freaking expired coupon, but still, made me want to melt through the floor. In my experience, doctors tend to be pretty decent patients when admitted to the hospital. They know the routine, they get to know the nurses, they try not to hassle anyone, they can speak to their own doctors as colleagues, etc. Nurses, on the other hand, feel it is very important for you to know at all times and in every sentence that they are nurses, and they are much better at nursing than you. I will say there was this one instance of a doctor/patient and a hospitalist getting into an argument that was pretty interesting. Basically, doctor/patient disagreed with what the hospitalist was doing and asked if hospitalist had read any of the recent studies which suggested that he, instead, follow a different protocol. Hospitalist was not down with the quote, "let's talk as colleagues," and decided to go full on, "screw you, I'm the only one wearing pants in the room right now." There was a mild argument, but remained incredibly civil. 2 days later, the hospitalist was fired. Doctor/patient's brother, or some other close relation, was the CEO. Nurses tend to thrash. Doctors go for surgically precise cuts. One time, I got a page about a patient who was still having some pain that wasn't relieved with the Tylenol she had specifically requested earlier. So, I ordered Toradol/Ketorolac. For those unfamiliar, Toradol is an NSAID, i.e., the same drug class as Advil/ibuprofen and Aleve/naproxen. The only difference is that it is not available over the counter and it can be administered both orally and parenterally, IV/injection. I get another page like 15 minutes later from the charge nurse about how this patient refused the Toradol because she is a nurse and does not want to be given any, quote, narcotic pain medication. I explained the situation to the charge nurse over the phone and got the feeling that the patient was under the impression that she was being given tramadol, which technically is an opioid, but not one of the good ones by any stretch. A discussion ensued, and despite very clearly explaining what I just wrote about Toradol in both lay and medical language, this nurse just insisted that she was right and vaguely insinuated I was trying to turn her into an addict. Her argument basically devolved into her shouting, "I've been a nurse longer than you've been a doctor, and I know what I'm talking about." I tend to give an honest effort to educate patients, but at some point, you just have to pick your battles. So, she got some naproxen, and I made it clear to the nursing staff that unless things significantly changed, either with her condition or her attitude, I did not want to get any more calls if she was still complaining of pain when the naproxen didn't work as well as she wanted it to. I'm a nurse, and I don't like announcing it when I am being treated medically. My OB knows what I do because I work with her. Sometimes they figure me out if I let some jargon slip. I don't bring it up because I'm an OB nurse, and generally, I have little knowledge about other specialties. I don't want them to leave information out because they assume I know. I also don't want them to feel like I am judging them and the care they give me, and have them act weird around me as a result. I have a doctorate. I visit the medical doctor very infrequently, but after a little initial confusion, my GP once remarked, "Oh, you're a real doctor." Med student. Had to go to the ED and then surgery for appendicitis. Got pimped by the surgeon. Felt bad, man. Edit. Getting pimped as a medical student is when you get grilled by your attending about facts about medicine that often are minutia they only know. Sometimes facts not even relevant to medicine. Even more often, the questions are, quote, read my mind type of questions. Your embarrassment and fear is what causes you to remember these facts, so they're used as a, quote, teaching tool. As a nurse, I could tell precisely which topics individual baby surgeons were traumatized by based on which BS orders and details they obsess over, and I curse whatever attending did that to them every time it becomes my problem. Speaking from both perspectives as a younger primary care physician. As a patient, my appointments are 50% what I'm there for and usually very direct, e.g., I have a sinus infection. It is now thick yellow-green discharge with fevers and present over 10 days. I think I may now need antibiotics. He will take a quick peek, then just give me a script. Then 50% non-related conversation regarding how my practice is going, learning a thing or two about a new specialist practice or tips and tricks of the trade. My doc is a very chill, well-versed, and quite an experienced physician who always teaches me a thing or two. As a physician, I also have multiple physicians as patients. My experience varies by specialty. Family physicians' patients seem more chill and relaxed, and usually drop by with a cup of coffee. Pediatricians who are patients are really fun to be around, but some of them seem to have underlying anxiety and at times fairly demanding. Internists are just so intimidating as patients, especially when older and more experienced, but always teach me a thing or two and force me to stay up to date on my guidelines. I also find specialist medical knowledge are more versed in their specialty. An ophthalmologist, as expected, won't know much about gynecology and PAPs, as their last PAP they did was in med school. Not a doctor, but as the husband of a nurse, it's horrid. My wife and the doctor/nurse practitioner will sit and bat ideas back and forth until they can get my wife to accept the diagnosis as her own idea. I'm a doctor. We make terrible patients because we tend to minimize or rationalize every warning sign. Going for a doctor's appointment basically reminds us that we can also get sick, and since we have the burden of knowledge, we're just hoping we don't find something that'll force a lifestyle change. Otherwise, most times it's been a pretty standard experience in terms of registering, waiting, and being seen for 15 minutes. If you go to someone you know personally, which I actually recommend against, you might get some preferential treatment, but it's mostly the same. Other way around, I'm a nurse and was taking care of a doctor I work with. Awkward. She asked me if she could give a urine sample, and she wasn't in for something I'd usually get one for, but then she made me nervous because she should know that. So I was like, you're the doctor, you tell me. And she said, nope, you're the one calling the shots now. And I was like, okay, well, I think we are good with that one then. It was pretty awkward all around, but I work labor and delivery, so we deliver a lot of our own nurses and doctors, which is strange, but also nice. Today I learned that doctors go see other doctors. I thought they healed themselves naturally, like glowy mist thingies oozing out of their bodies and raising up into the air. But I have heard of barbers going to other barbers. My PCP doesn't know I'm a physician. When he asked, I lied about my profession. Not a doctor, but trained first aider for 20 plus years now. Step 1. The precursor. I'd been going blind for months. Not just a little, but my vision, which was corrected to 20/20 normally, was now utter crap even with my glasses on, to the point where I couldn't read text on a monitor. Docs can't figure out what's going on, so I worry for weeks, test after test. Step 2. The night. This was the night I figured out what was wrong with me. I was suddenly nothing but thirsty and peeing. Like, get up every hour and stagger to the back room to empty a full bladder and then chug a quart of water thirsty and peeing. And when I get up in the morning, I realize I need medical attention because I was apparently a diabetic. I then chugged a 2-liter of Dr. Pepper because hyperglycemia is a lot less lethal in the short term than hypoglycemia. Didn't know if I'd already pushed past the butt end of hyperglycemia, but my first aid training was in the right place. Step 3, the exam. Go into the triage. Nurse takes my BP and vitals. Observes that I'm obviously not 100% there mentally. Docs get an IV in me, and as it flushes, they draw blood as well. I share that I think I'm diabetic, and the AP and nurse both smile, ignore it, and spend 4 hours asking me about what drugs I'm on. Step 4, smug face. I was diabetic. No apology from the doc, but my face was suitably smug every time he talked to me. Pretty great, really. Front of the line type stuff. Call my PCP friends or partner and say, "Hey, what are you doing for lunch? I've got a thing on me I want your opinion on. I'll buy you lunch." Or a radiologist. "Hey man, my shoulder's been killing me. I lifted too much with it and now it's borked. Mind doing an MRI? Sure. What's lunch look like for you?" Basically, I end up buying people lunches and they don't have to document anything. Win-win. I try not to flaunt my title, but it does have its advantages. Several years ago, I needed shoulder surgery. The morning of the surgery, the anesthesiologist and his nursing student came in. He asked if anyone had consented me for my nerve block. I said no, and his nurse started doing the prep work, draping my shoulder, cleaning, etc. The anesthesiologist starts to explain to me. "What we are doing is called a stellate nerve block," saying it very slowly. "It's where we take a probe and we try to find the nerve that goes down your shoulder." Again, all being said very slowly so I can understand. And then we do, I'm sorry, I'm one of the radiology fellows here in the hospital. His whole demeanor relaxed, and he said at a normal pace, "We're doing a stellate nerve block." He gently pulled the nursing student out of the way and finished the rest of the procedure himself. When I go to see a doctor, which is not often enough since I don't need no stinking doctor, it's nice to be able to cut to the chase and not have the minutia explained. However, I make it clear that I'm no longer on my playground, and it's their expertise that I'm paying for. I mostly sit there and try and convey what is wrong/what I need without telling the doctor. It's also hard not to just give them your history like you'd take a history and preempt their questions. Lay people don't announce, "Nothing runs in my family," without being asked. I always feel it's a bit twatty to say, "I'm a medical student/doctor" at the start, but then it's awkward when they work it out and you haven't told them before. I also feel under pressure to understand or remember exactly what they're talking about and prove my knowledge too. My dad is a pharmacist, and the number of times I'd come out of an appointment with a certain prescription and he would call the doctor to tell them to change it is countless. Most of the time he was colleagues or had a 1 degree of separation kind of relationship with these doctors, so they didn't seem to mind, even though it was awkward for me personally. Typically, he knew of a better option or just one of the generic, which would save him a bunch of money. I had one eye doctor who was mad though, so that was not fun. I am super polite, show up early, and yield to expertise that isn't specific to my specialty, radiology. I imagine that in some ways it's easier for my docs because they don't have to dumb anything down for me. I'm a nurse, and the worst thing for me is blood draws and IVs. At work, I'm the one they look for when there's a tough stick no one else can hit. I can tell in the first 30 seconds if the person knows what they're doing, but unless they're really hurting me, I try not to micromanage. Also, I have high blood pressure that runs 130/80 on a good day. If you let the air out of the cuff in 5 seconds and say it's 110/60, I don't trust you anymore. Not a doctor, but a medical lab scientist. My doctor knows what I do and sometimes jokes, "You could run this yourself, right?" Went to the ED and the RN asked if I was an MLS because she set the tubes she drew from my arm down without mixing them, and I immediately began to mix them. It's important to mix them because certain ones are rejected if a clot forms. She was like, "Great," without sarcasm. Another ED visit, the nurse learned what I did and insulted my career. "You just push buttons all day?" No. The instrument can't tell between a blast and a mono. I do. I go to an office outside of my job because I don't want my employer to have access to my medical record. Not that I have anything significant in my medical history to hide, and not that my employer can legally access my file without my consent, but I still like it this way. I started seeing a nurse practitioner out of necessity of getting an appointment, and now I choose to see her. She's thorough, she listens, and we get along really well. She actually gave me her personal email in case I needed to get a hold of her for any reason. That's not something you do for patients, but she knows I get it, and I would never abuse that privilege. 4th-year medical student. I tore my bicep, and before surgery, the anesthesiologist used an ultrasound to place a nerve block in my brachial plexus. This happens to be one of the biggest pain-in-the-butt bundles of nerves in the human body. It crisscrosses every which way and sends off branches which sometimes reconnect. I'm hopped up on benzos with a huge needle in my neck, and this dude is like, "What are the nerve roots of this little guy?" pointing to some blurry line on the screen. Screw that guy.
What's the smallest amount of power you've seen go to someone's head? Public school bus driver for a poor farming area, middle school aged. We weren't allowed to talk, even at a murmur. Turn our heads, read, or do homework. The ride was an hour each way. Any infractions, he would pull over and scream at us, and usually give any kids involved and whoever was next to them a multiple-day bus ban. Rural, poor area from the school meant a lot of kids just couldn't go to school those days. Our bus was always late because he pulled over 4 to 5 times a day. He would make personal stops to his home because F you, that's why. 20 years later, and still a hard contender for biggest loser I've ever met. I'm just picturing this one loser bus driver, impacting the entire education of this rural area. I mean, usually I feel bad for bus drivers or just about anyone that has to deal with the public in some capacity, and not this time. This guy just sounds like he really, really, really sucks. I worked at Blockbuster. One of the employees, Melanie, got a key holder promotion over me. We didn't really like each other, but it wasn't a blood feud. One day, the manager calls me to sub in for someone who called out sick. It's my day off. I'm at college and don't have my uniform. I tell the manager this and she says I need a body here to work the register. Come in naked. Just get here ASAP. I show up in normal clothes and I've been working with another key holder for about 6 hours. Melanie comes in to rent something because it's her day off and flips the F out. She goes back to the office and proceeds to write me up for failing to comply to dress code and so on. She then proceeds to try and make me sign it then and there, all while off the clock. She's still hourly. She does this for the next 2 hours until the store closes. No dice. I tell her to sit and spin on it. Manager comes in the next morning to a crap storm. Melanie gets written up for working off the clock, tells her I acted on a direct order from her, and she needs to get off her frickin' high horse. Alright, so I was a PA, production assistant, the lowest of the low on a film set, for a Kelsey Grammer submarine comedy called Down Periscope. One guy was giving the meaningless title of Key PA and decided he was going to help wrangle background extras for this big exterior shot we're working on. Now, everyone, including the extras, knew that the camera was probably framed in a medium close-up on the principal actors who were doing a scene way down at the end of the dock. Nonetheless, Key PA guy took it upon himself to start blocking out whole entire scenes of these background extras. I'm talking crowds of people. You guys over there, your families of the sailors who haven't seen your husbands in 6 months and you run from the bus to the fence, but you guys are cadets who get in the way and you guys are arguing about which car has the right of way. Then all you kids start clapping because you see a big doggy pulling his owner so fast he trips over the leash. Like second unit on a Michael frickin' Bay movie. He had these people doing this made-up little scene over and over and over. He'd yell at them, tell them they did it wrong and reset them back to 1 to start over. Madness. I walked by the guy and noticed this was going on and said, the camera is pointed the other direction, right? He just laughed and said, I know. Software developer here. We had a guy appointed as the change manager in charge of enforcing controls and coding standards. He was not a programmer. He would regularly reject changes because he didn't like how variables were named. Like he would want cust count renamed to CSTMR-CNT. Sounds kind of petty and like he felt like he had to do something, so he was just like, no, I don't like that, change it. When I played Halo 2, I joined a fairly large clan that had some pretty cool people in it. We did a lot together, and every once in a while they would elect a new forum moderator/officer to run the ranks. One day they elect this kid who sounded like he was 11 to be a new officer. He seemed pretty down to earth, but the very next day he gets home from school and starts kicking every single person from the clan who just even slightly brushed him the wrong way. It was so bad that the leader, who was on vacation in Hawaii, had to log on a library computer in order to strip all powers from this kid. The kid's reasoning was that he didn't get picked for a baseball game time at school and was angry the rest of the day. Which is why you don't give children power, because they have no idea how to communicate their feelings or separate their emotions from one situation to their emotions in another situation. Years ago, while working in a pizza place, our manager had to leave on a family emergency and left a girl in charge until one of the other shift runners could get there. He lived about 45 minutes away, and in that 45 minutes, this girl who was left in charge actually called one of her friends and hired her, saying she was the manager now, wrote me up for putting too much cheese on a pizza, and actually told one of the drivers he was fired because she didn't like his attitude. When the shift runner got there to take over, this girl also told him not to worry about it, and she had things under control. End result, her friend was not hired, my write-up for using too much cheese was torn up, the fired driver, who never left the parking lot, kept his job, and she quit a few days later because we were unprofessional and the manager played favorites. I lived in a village for a few months, and one of the richer farmers' wives got the job of running the community center. She put out a big placard with a picture of herself and titled herself CEO, as well as on business cards. Started wearing business suits and banning people she didn't like the look of. The building was the size of a small apartment and hosted a knitting and Bible club for senior citizens. Used to work with a group of interns in an office, and for some reason I still don't understand, they decided to promote one of us over the others. Their job was basically just to schedule who was doing what and when. That's it. Only took 2 weeks before we found out she was keeping detailed notes on all of our mistakes and taking them to upper management. They promptly told her to calm the F down and decided to do away with the position. She made a lot of enemies that day. She had ambitions of working at the company and was trying to make us all look bad. I think that one may have backfired on her. My favorite power trip was from one of my students. I had placed my kids in groups for a big project and gave them the option to elect their leader for each group. I intentionally placed all the quiet kids together, thinking nobody would overpower their ideas. I was so wrong. Vincent was elected leader because none of the other quiet kids wanted the responsibility, and he immediately became a despot, controlling whether they were allowed to ask me questions, giving assignments and dictating the exact outcome, loudly berating his teammates if a drawn picture was even millimeters off center. I want you to understand that before this, Vincent would hardly raise his voice when I made him answer questions for the class. After a day of guiding him toward better leadership strategies, I came in like the goddamn US Marines and deposed him, but better than the US because I facilitated the next election. The students decided no joint power between two entities, so no single person would let the power go to their head. It would have been a great teachable moment for checks and balances, but we were studying anthropology, so I let it go and always looked sideways at Vincent after that. There's always some shy, weak person that's waiting for an opportunity to grab a power and then abuse it. I mean, this is literally why I've always said don't trust people that do their utmost best to appear absolutely harmless. A girl I worked with was promoted to assistant manager at a Little Caesars because she was the only one there that was 18. She went from an okay worker to not doing anything and making my time there a living hell. I eventually quit and was asked to come back after she was fired. 5 years later, I got a random Facebook message from her apologizing for being such a douche during that time. I once worked part-time doing inventory. We would go to stores like the Bay, Whole Foods, and literally count everything on the shelves with our fancy, dancy machines. This one man was given leadership of the home section. Now, he wasn't actually given any management power, made the same amount as everyone else, all that. Just literally, he was told, okay, you and these people are going to the home section, divvy it up however. He went full power trip mode, micromanaging how I counted towels, patrolling the aisles, watching us all, yelling unnecessarily. From that day on, he was known as King Tut. That reminds me when I worked with this guy called Ivan. I think he was from Bermuda or something like that. He was okay, but he was like weirdly demanding and insistent that his way be the way that everyone worked, and yeah, I called him Ivan the Terrible. The upperclassmen at my university would proctor exams the freshmen would take. I wasn't there for this, but my friend tells me the story of how he and Lewis were the two proctors while the professor was in the office down the hall. Apparently, in an effort to prevent cheating, Lewis brought a clipboard and noted when and where each student went to the bathroom. Where, meaning that he would force students to use different bathrooms. The justification being that I suppose they could leave secret notes or something? So once the bathroom on the 1st, 2nd, and 8th floor each had one person go there, he made a kid use a bathroom in the building next to ours. Kid complains to the other proctor, who grabs the professor, who kicks Lewis from the job. Lewis, I know you use Reddit and I know you might see this, and I'm sure you'll figure out who I am. You're a frickin' C-word. You know, I don't know about this one. I think Lewis is being kind of smart, to be honest. I mean, still unreasonable, but still smart. Probably to my own head, when I was about 8 years old, I was asked by the teacher, because I was being a well-behaved little boy, to stand by the whiteboard while she was talking about something and write the names of people who were talking and acting out on the board. I went mad with power and wrote people's names down who just looked at me funny. In elementary school, I was on the safety patrol, which basically meant that I stood at the busy intersection alongside an adult crossing guard, and when he went into the street to stop traffic, I would let the little kids know it was safe to cross. I also told other kids not to run, etc. Well, one day, a girl, a grade below me, walked up the hill from elementary school to the intersection, instead of taking the stairs. So I grabbed her by the arm and marched her back to the stairs and told her she had to take the stairs. Proto-fascist right here. I got in trouble for it. Girl I was waitressing with, just us two, was going to be a manager, but wasn't a manager yet. She flipped out because I had a contraction and sat down a minute, screamed in front of patrons that she was my supervisor, she was better than me, and if I didn't like it, I could effing leave. I clocked out and quit on the spot. The captain, aka coach's kid on my 4th grade hockey team, ran into him in high school, and we were trying to figure out where we knew each other from. I eventually said, "Oh, you were on my hockey team in 4th grade." His response years later, "Your hockey team? Wow, that's funny. It was my hockey team." Honestly, I just think that's a hilarious response. My friend is the co-maid of honor in her sister's destination wedding. Her sister and her sister's fiancé are great friends of mine, and my friend and her husband are even closer, and she thinks she can control people's plans and arrangements. For example, I booked the resort through Amex instead of the room block, and months after booking, she is still fighting me about it. The bride and groom don't give a frick and have told me they would have done the same thing. My younger sister got an Xbox 360 some years ago on Christmas. Whenever my younger sister or I would ask to play, she would boss us around first, but ultimately deny us. Get me some juice first, bring me some snacks, make my bed. Me and my younger sister were just like, "Can we play now?" "No, you shouldn't have trusted me. Female dog." I had an older brother, I know that feeling, the whole you do the things that they ask you and then they literally turn around and go, "You shouldn't have trusted me." I'm pretty sure, yeah, they literally did that to me once and I was seething. I have a big group of friends who go to the local park on a regular basis and play outdoor games and board games. I bought a set of lawn darts as well as numerous other games. We were deliberately in a part of the park where no other people were around for at least 100 meters. The patrol drove up in a little cart. This fussy man got out, hooked his thumbs into his belt loops and shambles over to me like a Western cartoon character. The only thing he was missing was hay in his teeth and a hat to tip back. He tried to confiscate my lawn darts as they posed a danger to the public. I pointed out there was no public around outside of our group. Then he went with the line that the little lady was using them incorrectly and posing a danger to myself. I was 38 at the time and I am 5'10". I towered over his little diminutive self, and lady is not the first word I would use to describe myself. I asked him on whose authority he was confiscating my games and to show me the bylaw that allowed this. I even pulled out my phone to look up the park rules. He started to get flustered, and by this point my friends were openly laughing at his routine. He backed off and drove away. Later that day, when one of us made a complaint at the office, we learned he was actually the park maintenance man, garbage collector, and had zero authority. He wasn't even supposed to be driving that particular vehicle. Was the garbage collector douchey? Yes, but do you also sound like a douche? In my humble opinion, yes, but only when they start ragging on the person's size and stuff. They can't help that. My boss recently found out that he's related to Michelle Obama. He bragged about it all day. Self-roast. When I was in 2nd grade, we played a class maths game that included some quick mental thinking. There was a prize, the big digit timer. That was literally a timer or clock my teacher had probably gotten from the supermarket. It took most of the year for someone to finally win it, that person being me. Cut to a week later, and when someone insulted me, my go-to response of, "Yeah, well, I won the big digit timer and you didn't." Literally a frickin' timer. That's just another one that I find really funny. My boyfriend has his name on the title of the house next to his father's. My boyfriend and I live in a house that his dad bought for him so he could avoid dorm living. His sisters were living with us while they attended school with him, and they still drop by whenever they need to, and they're allowed to just walk in whenever. His dad shows up whenever he wants and needs to as well. Yet my boyfriend will get on the mic on his games, and when his friends start talking mad crap, he just goes, well, at least I own my own house. Yeah, but I have my own house. I'm going to college and I own a house. We can't afford to pay rent. His dad is paying for us to live here and buying our groceries. His dad also takes care of 100% of all the problems that happen with the house and whatnot. His dad technically owns the car my boyfriend drives. He has not paid for anything. Hell, I've paid more in rent and other expenses in total than he has. My daughter in 5th grade, when they gave her a safety patrol badge, oh my god, it was awful. We called her Paul Blart behind her back. She wasn't as incompetent as he was, but to say that she was taking her job seriously was an understatement. That just sounds cute. So, I'm not proud of this, that needs to be said. In high school, my boyfriend slid into home base, literally, this is not an innuendo, and sacrificed his ankle for a home run. I drove him to the emergency room, and when his mom arrived, I volunteered to go get food to escape her and feed his teammates. While waiting for my pizza at a nearby joint, the kind with games and crap for kids, I decided it would be so cool if I brought toppings with me. I was known as a bit of a rule follower, so I thought snagging the glass pepper and cheese shakers would make me look cool. I don't know, it was frickin' stupid. So I casually put them in my purse and internally applaud myself for being such a rebel. Then it happened. Miss, are you stealing those? I turn around to see a kid who was probably my age but seemed much more authoritative in that moment, looking rather indignant. He pointedly grabs my purse and gazes at the contraband, then looks at me with true disdain. I mean, you'd think there were dead kittens in that bag. He then proceeds to lecture me about theft. I was scared at first, my first criminal act was not going well, but then he starts talking about these condiments like they're housed in his great Nana's priceless glass cheese and pepper shakers. He starts threatening legal action, and now I'm mortified. I break a rule and my first ever police report will say, stole cheese. After several minutes of the sternest talking to ever be given by a mother frickin' busboy, the manager comes strolling by. The kid stops him to tell him what I've done. He is glowing with self-righteousness, like this act is one that will finally show his worth. They may let him run the ticket counter, or dare I say, work the actual register due to his courageous act of stopping yet another thief from taking red pepper flakes. Well, he was wrong. The manager looks at him, and with all the passion that can be mustered by a middle-aged man managing a pizza chain with skee-ball machines, he shrugs and says, "Okay, did you get them back?" Busboy proudly holds the sacred objects for his manager to see, nods the affirmative, and waits for his praise. The praise does not come. His manager simply shrugs again and mumbles, "Okay." Busboy is bruised, but not broken. He then enthusiastically suggests to the manager that the authorities be called and charges be filled so that I may be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. This woke his manager up a bit. His eyes widened and he looks at the busboy and asks, "Are you insane? You got the shakers back. We are done here." It was a hit for sure. Busboy is shocked. This is simply not how he saw this playing out. He thought this was his ticket out of cleaning puke out of the ball pit, but no. As he suffered through what I'm sure were flashbacks of the weekend of 8-year-old birthday party soda experiments and the mess those make, I realized that I was never in danger. This busboy was riding so high on the perceived power bestowed upon him by his pizza overlords, I had been scared. But he had no power here. As he regained composure and tried to save face by letting me off with a stern warning, I just laughed. I took my pizza and no condiments, and I left. I'm pleased that I do not have a police record, even more so that I don't have one that mentions Parmesan cheese, all because of the power-crazed busboy in history. Some people gotta really stop and think, am I being a total Jobsworth about this? Like, yeah, they were right to grab them and be like, no, don't steal the shakers, but then they just took it to a whole nother level that it
it didn't need to be taken to whatsoever. Like, yeah, don't let people steal from you, full stop. It sets a bad example and, people think you're weak. Man was trying to go above and beyond and just ended up looking like a fool. I bussed for a month at a restaurant before being promoted, but during that time, one of the managers would use the busboys as her personal assistants. She would have us do the small jobs she had to do while bussing. She also asked us the same way every time. Could you pretty please get me ice? Could you pretty please carry the boxes for me? Could you pretty please go get my food for me? She was older and had no husband, but desperately wanted a rich guy, and she also had a wild booger sugar addiction. I work at a big factory as the lowest level of manager, 5th level. Sometimes I work in projects with a guy in 2nd level management. He steps up to location manager, 1st level. Whenever our location manager is away. One day while working on a project, our location manager was away, and the guy I worked with had to leave in a minor emergency, water leak at home. He made me sign a document really quick, gave me a phone, and left. After reading the document, I quickly realized I was acting location manager. I went down a level to 3rd level management to visit my boss's boss and told him he was doing a good job and to keep it up. Priceless look on faces ensued. I don't know why, but I really thought that this was going to go in the direction of, so as acting location manager, I then handed off the position to the next guy beneath me and effed off to do something that I wanted to do, like visit someone or do something or go somewhere. I just today watched an 18-year-old kid get forklift certified while loading up trucks. He got the nerve to start barking orders at a senior staff, including myself, and hastily was revoked of his license. He didn't say a word as he left work today. My 5-year-old won the kindergarten Olympics. He was a complete butthead for about a week. When I worked at McDonald's, a teenager was made temporary assistant manager for a little under an hour and threatened to send 3 people home. That guy got his hours cut real quick. Twitch mods, it's hilarious. They can be given mod for no reason, and they are so stupid they actually think they are like a law enforcer. Young teens being given the power to ban people at will, and you can actually feel the inflation and narcissism. It's hilarious. Forklift certified? Well, that's your problem right there, don't you know? Getting forklift certification can corrupt you even faster than the one ring to rule them all. It takes a very special person to wield that kind of power.
Reddit, how have you made a rude person's day worse? Excuse the change in voice, I am currently getting over COVID. Today on the train, I sat next to a woman who was angry that I sat next to her because she wanted the 2 seats to herself. As I sat there, she kept mouthing under her breath how she just wanted to sit there alone, blah blah blah. Despite the fact I wanted to tell her that it was public transportation and she needed to get over it, I kept my mouth shut. A few minutes later, a large woman with a large purse comes and stands in the same car I was in. I get her attention and tell her that she could have my seat. She huffs and puffs her way to me, and I help her sit down while grinning at the angry woman who was upset I'd sat beside her. I enjoyed watching her head almost explode from anger as the other large woman's rolls and purse pressed against her for the rest of the ride. Anyone else have any of those subtle revenge stories? Edit, this lady is a regular and is a known seat hog. I've seen her get into arguments before with people because she wants 2 seats to herself. Everyone pays to ride the train, so if there's a seat open, then it's up for grabs. I was working as a manager in a big nightclub about a year ago. I don't wear a uniform, but have a radio and run the security team. The venue has a great smoking section that looks out onto the street. One night, the venue was packed, so I did my usual roam making sure that there were no problems. However, it was too packed to walk through the smoking section, so I walked down the street instead, but could still very easily see into the smoking section. One guy stares me down, then calls me over and starts swearing at me for no reason, and telling me that, quote, pieces of crap like you can never even get into a venue like this. He obviously had no idea I was the manager. However, I didn't want to have security get into a fight inside with him. The guy kept telling me he would punch me out and stuff, and was clearly trying to look macho to impress someone. So I agreed and told him to come and meet me outside, and he could even have a free swing. He puts his drink down, takes off his jacket, and storms outside. Once he walked outside, I walked back inside and told security not to let him back in. The look on his face when he realized I ran the place was priceless, and then the realization that he couldn't get back into the club was amazing. It was the easiest and most fun removal I have ever done. I'm a manager at a grocery store, so I get awesomely rude customers on a daily. Every Wednesday is senior discount day. You have to be 55 to 60 to qualify for the discount. Needless to say, Wednesdays are tense. Lots of seniors and lots of other people who don't want to deal with the seniors. I don't generally mind the old folks. Most of them are pretty cool and have some interesting stories and cute jokes. This Wednesday, there was one particular customer who was being a huge pain in the butt from the moment she walked in. She was tall, blonde, high heels, very made up, and dressed to the nines. She was probably late 30s to early 40s. She came storming up to customer service. "There are no parking spots. This is ridiculous. I'm going to request to corporate that you expand your parking lot since you don't seem to have the initiative to request that yourself." Off to a great start, lady. She comes storming back up about 45 minutes later. "I am in a huge hurry, and every line has someone in it. I need to check out here." We had 3 lines open, and each one had one single customer. One. I say, "No problem, but I'll get you at a checkout. You have too many items to get here." She has a huge hissy fit. "I don't have time for this. Let's go." As I'm checking her out, it is constant whining. "You only have one brand of makeup? That is ridiculous. I only wear MAC, but I was going to settle for Revlon, but you don't even have that. Now I have to make a whole separate trip. Please don't put my bread on top of my eggs. The eggs could roll over and crush the bread. Please bag my avocados separately. I need to use those for a face mask tonight. They need to be perfect. I have a photo session for work tomorrow. I'm in a magazine." She was unbelievable. Finally, at the end, I had enough. As she's about to pay, I say, "Don't forget today is senior discount day. You get 5% off." She just stared at me. "What?" I smiled broadly. "Every Wednesday, senior citizens get 5% off their bill. I'll go ahead and take it off. You are 55 to 60, right?" She is staring at me, debit card in hand, cheeks getting red. I lose my smile slowly and say, "Oh, you don't qualify? Sorry about that. Maybe next year. Thanks for your honesty." I haven't seen her in the store since. I used to work for the DMV, and the one I worked at had pretty limited parking. Surprise! I had left for lunch, came back, and was having a hard time finding a place to park. I finally found a spot, so I drove up to it and put my signal on, showing that I was waiting for it. People, in my experience, usually respect this and continue on. Not this time. Just as the car was backing out, after I had waited a few minutes, a car came from the opposite side of the lot, made eye contact with me, and then shot right into the parking space. I was so mad because now I would be late after looking for a new spot. As I drove past the woman that had taken the spot, I just shook my head and she responded by shrugging her shoulders, smiling, mouthing the words, "Oh well," to me, and then ran her finger from her eye down her cheek as if to mock me crying about it. I continued into work, got in trouble for being late, but had actually forgotten about the incident until whose number gets called to my station but Miss Spot Stealer herself. The look on her face was priceless. Keep in mind that I'm not your average DMV worker. I understand that stuff happens and waive penalties all the time and treat my customers with respect because I believe that what goes around comes around, and I know how crappy it is to wait at the DMV all day. I'm usually so nice about getting penalties taken off people's accounts that I get in trouble for it at times. So, I greet Spot Stealer as nice as I would anyone else. In fact, it may have been nicer than I normally would be. She may have thought I didn't recognize her. Her registration is far past due, with hundreds due in penalties. I let her tell me her whole sob story and then finally tell her that she owes in full because she was aware of her due date. She argues it a little until, out of sight from my manager, I mouth the words, "Oh well," and drag my finger from my eye to my cheek, mocking her tears. At point, she puts her head down and proceeds to take out her card and pay the full amount. Because yes, we do take debit cards. What goes around, comes around. When I was working a crappy job in my younger days, a customer was upset that he had to wait in line like everyone else before being able to make his purchase. He actually said, "Do you know who I am? I own hotels." To which I replied, "Well, sir, I'm sorry, but this isn't Monopoly. This is Krispy Kreme." He was not pleased. Not even COVID can keep me from telling you to subscribe to Am I the Genius and Am I the Jerk, linked in the description below. As always, thanks for watching, and I promise I'll sound a lot better next time. I was sitting in my car taking some photos with my new smartphone while using different settings. Then there was this woman who had just stopped at a one-way street with only one lane. So she stands there for like 10 seconds doing nothing, and I thought this is very unusual. So I started to make a video. Another driver comes and honks. She then starts to reverse and hit the car of the other guy with her big BMW. 4 guys jumped out of the BMW and start yelling at the guy. You have to know in Germany, always the one who hits another car from behind will be blamed if he can't prove that it wasn't his fault. So we have a classic case of insurance fraud. The poor guy at the back was really worried because he knew he couldn't prove it. I just sit there in my car and waited for the police. Then I go outside and the police started to get the stories. Of course, there was 4 against 1. I just stood there and listened to the woman complaining about who this idiot hits her from behind and her brand new car is now damaged. After the police took the statement from both sides and even take my statement, they said there was no chance that 2 versus 4 could prove that he didn't do it. 2 of the guys at the BMW said they didn't know the girl and were pedestrians who saw it. That would increase the credibility. So they made all false statements to the police, and exactly that's the thing I wanted to happen. I then told the police, oh wait, there's just one thing, like Columbo style, and said that I have a video of what happened. I showed them to the police, and the women and the drivers just stand there with mouth open. You could not only see how she hits his car, but also that the quote, pedestrians were with the women in the car. The guy then hugs me, and we became good friends. Turns out he lives near me, and we spend the evening drinking and gaming. I'm in a massive line at a store. I'm next in line, but the person in front of me has a crap load of stuff. A helpful clerk sees the mess and opens another aisle saying, I can help the next customer. Well, that's me. However, the checkout counter has 2 sides, a right and a left. It is set up for people to come to the right side, but the left can be used as well. As I am stepping over to her counter, this jerkwad from the very end of my line is sprinting to her counter, pushing people with his partner in tow. He arrives right before me. They have a mountain of items in their cart, which he starts throwing on the checkout counter. I am standing there on the other side with my one item burning with rage. Checkout girl waits until he stacks all of his crap on the counter, looks at me, looks at him, and says to him, I'm sorry, sir, you're on the wrong side. You'll have to go to the end of the line, which is now massive. I put on my biggest grin, made eye contact with him as long as possible, and loudly told the clerk how awesome she was. Just the other day, I was at a Chinese buffet, and the 3 people in the booth next to me were questioning the waitress. She appeared to be Asian Hispanic, about voting for the president and who she planned to vote for. She had trouble understanding them and communicating that she could not vote. They immediately began taunting her that she shouldn't be here if she couldn't vote, that she didn't even know who the president of the United States is, and then took a picture and said they would post it on Facebook. I later found out the waitress was on a school visa and couldn't vote, but was unable to convey that to them. After the waitress walked off, one of the girls at the table, the one who took the pic, looked up and asked me where I worked because I looked familiar. When I replied, the local university in the social work department, she commented that she had recently been in my office to apply to our program, to which I replied, yes, I remember you, and I'm also on the admissions committee, followed with a wink. The color drained from her face, and she knew she was screwed. Karma's a jerk. TLDR, I provided unsolicited marriage counseling services to a jerkwad. I worked at a hotel several years ago and had to deal with insufferable pricks about a dozen times a day. Hotel stories about Billy Mays watching granny adult films, a person that threw hot coffee in my face, a person that spit on me, and a crazy lady that slapped me are in my comment history. The best/most evil revenge I ever got was on a guy that stayed with us 4 days a week for the entire 5 years I worked at the hotel. The big utility company in our area was having financial issues, and he was the leader of the auditing team that was sent in to straighten it out. Anyway, I would interact with the guy at least a few times every day I worked, and he was always very rude and condescending. As an example, one of his coworkers would ask me for a local restaurant recommendation, and he would chime in with, yeah, because minimum wage workers are known for their taste in fine dining. If someone asked me for something personal, he would say something like, ask him what life choices he made to be here plunging toilets and writing down my preferred wake-up call time. Maybe he can share his wisdom so we all avoid his fate. Stuff like that. He was just a jerk to everyone on the hotel staff and was always very demanding. Since I saw him every day, I noticed that he had developed a relationship with one of the younger women on his auditing team. I saw the romance blossom from flirting to full-on groping and grinding in the hotel lobby. One day, he had just finished delivering one of his delightfully crappy bon mots to me, and I was fuming. Then he screamed at one of my coworkers because she had a Filipino accent, and he said he only wanted his room cleaned by, quote, white Americans. I vowed revenge. His wife called in to speak to him later that night, like she usually did, and I said, "Oh, I think he's sleeping in Mrs. Blank's room tonight. One moment, please." And then I connected his wife to her room. His wife must not have told him what I had said, because he didn't try to get me fired. They got a divorce. They didn't have kids, but according to another guy on the auditing team, his wife got the house and custody of their dog. He stopped saying with us shortly after the phone call. I was riding my bike to work one day, and when crossing a street, in the legal zone with the walk sign, a woman ran me over. She drove through the crosswalk looking to turn right and ran right into me. She stopped after I got bumped hard enough by her fender to take a spill and have some bruising all down my side. She gave me an exasperated, "my bad" wave and continued to talk on her cell phone, ignoring me as I picked myself and my bike up. I walked right up to her open window, grabbed her cell phone from her ear, and chucked it into a nearby parking lot as hard as I could. I swear that was the farthest I have thrown anything in my life. She gaped at me in shock as I struggled back onto my bike and slowly rode off, fuming yet victorious. Then a half-mile farther on my trek, I got attacked by a goose. Not my best day. TLDR, woman hit me with her car, got revenge, got attacked by goose. Edit, those who have pointed out that riding a bike in a crosswalk is not legal are correct. In this particular instance, it was not a sidewalk but a designated bike path. They had a normal walk signal at an intersection, but I believe it was still acceptable to ride across as it was a bike-specific path. I could be wrong though. I work in local theater, and we have a lot of rude, awful women who are part of local ballet schools come through our venue who are the mothers of the dancers. Once, this woman rang up wanting seats to an almost sold-out ballet performance that had been on sale for 4 months the day before the show and did nothing but abuse me for 5 minutes because she left buying them too late, whined about how she shouldn't have to pay for her kids, whined that we should get a bigger venue, it seats just under 500, then put me on hold while she rang 3 of her relatives to see if they wanted seats too. She was positively awful. The seats I was about to sell her were the only ones in the theater left, and there were good seats. While I'm on hold, a grandma of one of the ballerinas comes to the desk and asks if we have any seats left, as she'd been in hospital and couldn't buy them earlier, but said she'd understand if we were booked out. I put the phone with the on-hold music down and sold this old lady the last seats for the show and gave her an invite to our next year's dance season for her granddaughter and herself, so she'd know exactly when all the important dates were coming. She thanked me over and over, and she's now one of our regulars and brings her grandkids to our shows. 2 minutes after the old lady leaves, the jerk on the other end finally takes me off hold and says she wants the remaining seats that we have left. I tell her, "Sorry, we've just sold out while you had me on hold, I'm afraid. Better luck next year. Anything else I can help you with?" She was choking with rage on the other end of the phone. It was fantastic. I watched a lazy shopper park their grocery cart right behind another person's car instead of putting it in the cart return. I got out of my car, ran up and moved the cart, and put it behind her car. I then ran off and watched her have to get back out of her car since she couldn't back out, and then finally proceed to put up her cart the right way. I felt like a champion of the people. Saw a woman with her husband toss a squash into a cooler that they apparently didn't want anymore. As they walked away, I picked up the squash and followed them. They left their cart for a moment, so I put the squash into their cart and walked away. She had a dumbfounded look on her face when she noticed it back in her cart. I put it in a very noticeable place and proceeded to put it on a nearby shelf, and they walked away. I, of course, took it off the shelf and followed them again, doing a drive-by drop-off of the squash. At this moment, my girlfriend got fed up with my antics and made me stop. I would have done it until they gave up and bought the squash, or I was caught. I'm very easily amused. Heard this from a DJ in my hometown. He's pushing his cart of groceries out of the store and over to his car when a woman pulls into the handicap spot in front of the store. No placard, no handicap plates. Jumps out of the car without so much as a limp and heads into the store. He gives her the stink eye about taking up a handicap spot, and she snarls, "Deal with it," and sachets into the store. This guy is mad. He sees a couple cops who were leaning against their cars talking. They hadn't seen it, so he goes over and tells them the story. They smile and say they'll handle it. He puts his groceries in his car, and as he's pushing his cart back to the store to put it in the rack, good guy DJ, he says the cops had blocked the lady's car with theirs and were leaning against their car waiting for her. As he's putting his cart in the rack, the lady comes out of the store with her purchase, sees the cops, and almost craps herself. The fine in California is $250 to $500 for a first offense. Priceless. He walks over to her and says, "I dealt with it." Female Redditor. I was out at the local watering hole having a few beers with a group of friends. The group became larger and larger with time. After a while, I got semi-separated from my fiancé. I was introduced to a guy. We'll call him Bob. The introduction went like this. "Bob, this is psychocentric. Psychocentric, Bob." To which he says, "Every psychocentric I've ever met is a slut and unfaithful." Now, I don't get bent out of shape without good reason, so I just brush it off as drunk banter, or maybe a recent breakup with a psychocentric and say, "Well, I neither, but nice to meet you anyway, Bob," and shook his hand. The rest of the night, he would go to the bar, walk back, and give me the stink eye. For whatever reason, he didn't like me. The feeling was becoming mutual. I decided ignoring him would probably be best. He was certainly not in his right mindset, right? A few hours passed, and I was sitting by his female friend, having fun talking and giggling. He puts his elbows on the table in between us, staring at me like I had done him wrong somehow. I just kept on with our conversation and ignored him. He then puts his nasty face right next to mine and says, "So, are you a slut?" My temper and alcohol got the best of me, and I yelled, "No, and what is your problem exactly? I've been doing my best to ignore you. Get a clue." He then chest bumped me and said, "Do you want to go?" I'm all for equal rights, but this was the first time an able-bodied adult male has asked me, a girl, if I wanted to throw down. I walk over a few steps to my fiancé, who was talking to a bouncer friend of ours, and said, "This guy says he wants to kick my butt," while the douche just keeps advancing. The bouncer looks at him, gives a hand signal, and soon 5 red shirts, bouncer uniforms, surround him. He was, quote, escorted out of the bar and went to his minivan, drunk. I called work. I work for the sheriff's department. They got a good tip on a sure thing DUI. I might not have thrown down, but I think I won that round.
When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, linked at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot, linked in the description too. Either way, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.